Chapter 262. Diablo was slightly taken aback, then he frowned. How can I see it with my own eyes? I only remember it. How can anyone see it with their own eyes 2,000 years ago? What about you? Li Yunxin asked gently. It is said that a pangolin dug through a mountain to release you. You are a great demon, but do you remember yourself before you achieved Tao? What were you before? Diablo was stunned for a moment. What? I mean, for example, your true body is a scorpion. You achieved Tao and gained human form. Do you remember what happened before you took human form? But Diablo was stunned for a moment again. What? His tone and expression were exactly the same as before. Li Yunxin stared at him in silence for a while. Then he understood. This is the background story. Diablo and old demon Fulu were both created demons. They remembered their origins, but when he asked about what happened before, then they froze. Mrs. Sanhua's current body was also created by herself. But the difference between her and them was probably that the soul that possessed her body was not created. That's why such a situation didn't happen? He didn't ask anymore, and only asked Diablo to continue. Sure enough, the great demon's stunned expression disappeared. He continued. After old demon Fulu gave birth to his 7 sons, something big happened one day. There was a pangolin that achieved Tao, and its nature was to randomly drill underground. Later, that thing befriended old demon Fulu, and came to my place as a guest. That pangolin couldn't stay idle, so it dived underground again. In the end, just like that, a disaster happened. Diablo frowned slightly as he spoke, as if those things really happened and were still vivid in his mind. Then this thing came out. He pointed at the huge skeleton behind Li Yunxin. This thing is a prehistoric old demon. It was originally hibernating underground. It was awakened by that pangolin, and came out to wreak havoc. We were at a disadvantage when we fought against him, and we were in a precarious situation. Old Devil Fulu's 7 children were also captured by him, and placed in a pill furnace to be refined into magic treasures. Alas, what would happen if he refined it into a magic treasure? Diablo sighed and said, that old demon Fulu also has a treasure called the Rainbow Lotus. He and I snuck into the lair of the primitive old demon, and took out the 7-colored lotus seed pod. The lotus seed pod sucked his 7 children in, and instantly turned into a huge mountain, suppressing the primitive old demon. Old demon Fulu's magic treasure is a dual cultivator with his life. He knows that his lifespan is almost up. Then, he turned into countless iron vines and bound the old devil once more. Only then, did we kill him. Li Yunxin listened quietly, then thought for a moment and said, but this thing is so big, there are no records of it. This area has been inhabited since 2,000 years ago. However, there were no rumors about it in the secular world. This matter is also remembered by you? Diablo widened his eyes. Of course I remember, of course it is true. But according to what you said, the 7 children of old demon Fulu were lured in, and turned into a mountain to suppress the primitive old demon. Why are they still fine now? Diablo sighed. Of course they came out from the mountain after being suppressed. He raised his hand and pointed above. My Pitfall Mountain used to be a mountain formed by them. After they came out, the mountain became hollow. But it's a pity. They don't know what happened back then. I didn't want to say it either, but now they think that I am the one who harmed old demon Fulu. Li Yunxin stared at him for a while, and realized that he was speaking the truth. He didn't ask anymore, because he was afraid that something bad would happen if he asked. At this point, he felt that he understood some things. The huge skeleton behind him was definitely not what Diablo said, that the pangolin came out from the ground. According to the background story, the one that came out was Diablo. But Art Saint seemed to have used other methods to fine-tune the plot. Li Yunxin thought that Art Saint did so many seemingly pointless things here to suppress the skeleton. He first suppressed it, then made some demons to guard it. As for why there was a background story and fake memories, he felt that this might be a key point. This was the key point of this matter, and also the key point of the painting path he was currently cultivating. According to his current thinking, it was probably related to wish power, or something like that. But he didn't dare to speculate or deduce the key point, because the painting had truly shocked him. He used to think that he was a genius with extremely high ability and comprehension, and his understanding of painting path was also considered to be at the top of the world. But after seeing the ruins of Art Saint, he realized that he was just a frog in a well. Because of this, he didn't ask anymore. But the problem was that even if Diablo was created, he was still a great demon with extremely high cultivation. He originally came to harm him, but after seeing this painting, he changed his mind and planned to trick it into his hands. But now that he knew so many things, he changed his mind again. He didn't dare to take this painting anymore. Who knew what would happen if he took the painting away? And whether the terrifying skeleton behind him would come back to life? Who knew what kind of terrifying thing that skeleton was? This world was too mysterious, and there were too many secrets. In the past, he had an incomparable sense of superiority towards this world. But more and more things were slowly wearing away his original playful heart. Now he gradually realized that he seemed to be in a trap. And the trap was set up by the most terrifying group of people in this world. They began to wrestle with each other a long time ago. The visible and invisible, the sound and the silent war began thousands of years ago, and it had yet to end. He was involved in this trap from the moment he was born, and now he was becoming more and more important in the trap. But this also meant that he was sinking deeper and deeper. Li Yunxin sighed. Okay, maybe what you said is true. It sounds like you're not a bad guy. Let's make a deal. I'll teach you how to use the ancient scroll, and you let me go, okay? The evil king blinked and thought for a while. He was hesitating, and the reason why he was hesitating was because of Li Yunxin. In fact, from the moment he saw this big demon, Li Yunxin had been trying to influence him. It should have been in vain. He didn't know this demon very well, and the demon was very cautious. But then the evil king put him into the painting. For a painting Taoist priest, the painting was his home field. He was the successor of the art saint. Although there was a world of difference between his realm and the mysterious saints, some principles were still the same. When they were talking, he couldn't see the flaws in the environment. But it was different when they were fighting fiercely. The environment in the painting was transformed from the true meaning of the painting. He and the evil king plowed the land upside down, and the qi in the painting was affected. The environment in the painting had to be repaired, and it wouldn't always be that dilapidated. And when the qi moved, there were traces to follow. For an ordinary Taoist painter, finding the flow of qi in such a complicated painting, using it, and influencing it was a task as difficult as ascending to the heavens. But Li Yunxin wasn't one of those painting Taoist priests who had withered and were kept by Daotong or Kenzo. In the midst of the battle, he had found certain routes of spiritual power flow and used them. Over there, using them meant that he could control the world in the painting to a certain extent. This was also the reason why, as a true realm demon, he was able to survive the all-out attack of the evil king, who was in the profound realm. But at the same time, he did something else, something he was best at. He also used the qi in the painting to influence the evil king's consciousness during the battle. But he couldn't do it perfectly at that time. But it was enough to plant a seed in his heart. When he woke up and found himself in the darkness, he was secretly happy. And when the evil king appeared with a lamp, the environment was dim, and the light was dancing. This was one of the two things he loved the most. In such an environment, facing someone who already had a seed in his heart, he could do a lot of things. For example now, if Li Yunxin had made such a request 2 hours ago, the evil king would have snorted and laughed at him for being whimsical. But now the evil king had hesitated for a long time. The dragon sun in front of him made him experience a strange emotion. This emotion was gradually washing away the hostility in his heart, making his will more and more shaky. He even thought, what if I let him go? This dragon sun looked very gentle, and his words were also gentle, like a person who would keep his promise. If he talked to him properly, he didn't have any grudges with the dragons. He wouldn't necessarily harm him, and maybe they could become good friends. As for other people, other things, what did it matter? So the evil king's eyes finally softened. He thought for a moment and said, I don't have any grudges with you. If someone didn't tell me that you might come here to trick me, we wouldn't be like this. If you promise me that you won't tell anyone about this ancient scroll, and teach me how to use this treasure, I will let you go. Maybe we can be friends in the future. It's also a good thing to drink and have fun. Li Yunxin smiled and nodded. Okay. I promise you. But you have to untie my feet first. The evil king didn't hesitate this time. He stretched out his hand and pointed at Li Yunxin's feet, and the iron chain was untied. So he sighed softly. This iron chain was really something. When he was locked just now, he couldn't even run his wagon smoothly. He really didn't know what it was made of. Was it really the incarnation of the old demon Fulu? But now he didn't want to pursue these things. He just wanted to get away as soon as possible. It had been almost a day since he left Dongting. He had to go back as soon as possible. Otherwise, someone would be anxious. But at this time, suddenly a deep thunderous sound rang out above their heads. Chapter 263. It was because of this sound that Evil King suddenly frowned. Li Yunxin cursed in her heart. This is bad. But the second loud sound came immediately. This time, the sound was louder, and the vibration was more violent. Even their feet were trembling slightly. Evil King was dazed for a while, and suddenly his eyes widened. You actually tricked me? He woke up from the hypnotic state just now. It was originally just an emergency measure. Li Yunxin couldn't treat him like a patient, and he didn't have enough time to complete the act with the other party's cooperation. What he had been doing was to carefully guide and amplify the other party's emotions. But today's sudden situation had pulled Evil King's attention away, and he got rid of Li Yunxin's control. Li Yunxin sighed, smiled bitterly, and slowly raised his hands. Evil King's magic is great, I obviously failed. As soon as he finished speaking, the third roar came. Evil King stared at him again, looked up, and waved his hand. Then there was a little light above them. It was the hole he came in from. A figure appeared in the hole. My king, someone outside is challenging you. The voice sounded familiar. It seemed to be the snake spirit Seven Duanjin. Who is it? Why is there such a big commotion? The snake spirit hesitated for a moment and said, he calls himself Hatred. Evil King was slightly stunned, and turned to look at Li Yunxin. But he found that Li Yunxin's face was also surprised. But at this moment, Evil King knew that this guy was very cunning, and it was hard to tell whether this expression was fake or not. Hatred. If it was really hatred, it meant that he was the big brother of this guy in front of him. Evil King had never seen Hatred, but he had heard of his name for a long time. He looked at Li Yunxin fiercely, and said in a deep voice, Good dragon Geo. You actually played a trick of inside and outside, huh? Li Yunxin was silent. He felt that Hatred should come for him. But the problem was, Hatred was not necessarily hatred. The first time he met his brother was by Dongting Lake. On that day, he had just killed Yunzi and cheated back the translucent jade slip from Kunwazi and Lord Dongting. Then Hatred shows up with a dragon token, claiming that he is entrusted by the dragon to come to Dongting to do something. Hatred's human appearance looked honest and mighty, but Li Yunxin still remembered. After the sky turned dark, his temperament suddenly changed. He even started to refer to himself as this young master. That was the 9th young master's favorite nickname. Since then, Hatred had disappeared without a trace, but now he suddenly appeared. That guy, if he really came for him, how did he know that he was in Pitfall Mountain? His momentary silence made the Evil King think that he was feeling guilty. Don't think that I'm afraid of you dragons. Humph, that Dongting Lake has inhibition formations. But do you think my Pitfall Mountain doesn't have any? I've been guarding the Pitfall Mountain for 2,000 years, and it's like an iron bucket. He points up while sneering. Even if the dragon comes here, it will take him half a day to break this inhibition formation. Li Yunxin thinks for a while and spreads out his hands. You misunderstood me. He is not here to save me. He is here to kill me. If you don't believe me, we can go up and confront him outside. Or we can ask him to come in and confront him. You know I am telling the truth. When Li Yunxin lied to him, the Evil King believed him. But now no one believed him when he told the truth. The Evil King looks up and laughs. Do you think I'm stupid? Ask him to come in? Humph, you wish. But if you want to confront him, hee, I will ask you to confront him. Have a good fight. At this moment, The big demon in the mysterious realm has almost lost his mind. He held a monster's blood feast, but Dragon's Son showed up. Dragon's Son knew so many of his secrets, and Dragon's Son almost fooled him into letting him go. Now that he has just woken up, this guy's big brother came to bully him. These dragons are really arrogant. Do they think they can come and go as they please? Li Yunxin frowns and waves his hand. Evil King, you don't have to be like this. I was forced to deceive you just now. It would be better if he didn't say deceive and deceive. Hearing these two words, the anger in the evil king's heart becomes even stronger. He has never been deceived like this before. Once this accident is over, and I really let Dragon's Son go, it will be a great humiliation to me. So he takes 2 deep breaths and sneers. Deceive me? Hee hee. I will let you have a taste of this. After saying this, he pounces forward and grabs Li Yunxin's throat. Li Yunxin doesn't move, letting him do whatever he wants. He only says in a hoarse voice, Sai, why do you have to do this? You are the enemy of us dragons. When the evil king heard him say us dragons, he is even more certain of his thoughts. He doesn't want to talk nonsense with him anymore. His fingers move randomly, casting some kind of magical power. An iron chain stretches out from the huge skeleton and wraps around Li Yunxin's head. But the iron chain disappears in an instant. Li Yunxin finds that he can't speak. The iron chain seems to have sunk into his body, not only making him unable to speak, but also restraining his joints. When the evil king moves his hand, he also moves like a marionette. The evil king takes a step back and looks at Li Yunxin proudly, sneering. Hee hee, I will let you have a taste of this. After saying this, he swings his arm and takes Li Yunxin up into the air. When they arrive at the hall of the Pitfall Mountain, they find that it is already a mess. The braver demon kings are crowding around the cave entrance, while the less courageous demons are running around. But the demons of the Pitfall Mountain know that there are restrictions on the mountain, and it seems to be orderly. When the demons see the evil king, they start to clamor. But the evil king only sneers and doesn't say anything. He takes Li Yunxin and strides towards the exit. The demons obediently make way for them. When the evil king walks past, they follow behind him like a swarm of bees. These demons are stupid. When the evil king isn't here, they are afraid. But when the evil king is here, they throw their fear to the back of their minds and only want to watch the show. When they are about to reach the exit, the evil king waves his hand. Li Yunxin is restrained by him, walking stiffly beside him. After a dozen more steps, they can see the situation outside. The sky is already dark. But although the sky is dark, the scenery is not dark. This was because the Pitfall Mountain was enveloped in a layer of 7-colored light, illuminating a large area nearby. In this light, a tall man wearing a golden crown and a yellow robe stands a dozen steps away from the cave entrance. He stands with his hands clasped behind his back, staring into the cave. When he sees Li Yunxin and the evil king, he squints his eyes fiercely, then grits his teeth and smiles. Good brother, good friend, you really are here. But Li Yunxin can't say anything, so he can only show a smile on his face. The evil king and he stop at the cave entrance, staring at each other from afar. The demons behind them are still clamoring, but the evil king stares at the man for a while, then shouted, Don't be noisy. The demons immediately become silent, not making a sound. Seeing the evil king's imposing manner, the man also stares at him, then smiles at Li Yunxin. But this smile is not from gritting his teeth. Instead, it is sweet, as if he has missed him for a long time, and now he finally sees him. Looking at his smile, Li Yunxin knew what kind of smile it was. It was like a pervert who had finally caught his prey and was about to torture him. Then he would pick up a sharp knife and slice the meat off his body bit by bit with a smile. Li Yunxin knew what kind of smile he was going to make. Hatred smiles like this, then said, Ah, good. I was worried that you would sneak into the Pitfall Mountain, get caught and hurt by this old demon. Now that I see that you are unharmed, I can finally breathe a sigh of relief. My good brother, good friend. Hatred stares at Li Yunxin. You and I were going to work together to destroy this Pitfall Mountain. But now I can't come in. What should I do? At this point, Li Yunxin feels that he can confirm his identity. This Under the appearance of Dragon Sun hatred, there is another person. Although he doesn't know how or why, but he knows. The person who is talking to me now is the ninth young master. It is the ninth young master. In this world, there is probably no one who knows the ninth young master better than me. At that time, he was trying to survive carefully, and the ninth young master is an insurmountable and dangerous factor for him. He must, with all his attention and all his energy, cater to him, observe him, guess at him. Through his words and actions, he can infer his heart, character, and predict his movements. Then, he will rack his brains and use everything he knows to lead him into a dead end. Because of this, he knows that this is the familiar ninth young master. Your enemy always knows you the best. Therefore, he knows what this person is thinking now. This evil king is angry at me for playing with his emotions, and now he wants to take revenge. Therefore, he controls me and wants to return the same trick to me. But evil king's hatred, how can it be compared with the ninth young master? There is probably no one in this world who has a stronger idea than the ninth young master about giving him a taste of his own medicine. Evil king sneered when he heard the words of the ninth young master in hatred's body. He squinted at Li Yunxin. Li Yunxin can read the meaning in his eyes. It is nothing more than as I expected. Li Yunxin also smiled. He doesn't want to talk at all. Evil king looks at hatred again. Hey, we are working together from the inside. You think too highly of yourself. But you don't know that your ninth brother has already turned to me, right? You stupid worm. Don't you use your brain to think about it? Pitfall Mountain is only hundreds of miles away from Dongting Weishui River. And we have been neighbors for thousands of years. Which one is closer? Today, I will tell you. It is your ninth brother and I who set you up. Hatred is not annoyed at his words at all. He smiles sinisterly. Closer? You are closer to my real ninth brother, aren't you? You ask the person beside you. Is he Long Jiao or a cultivator named Li Yunxin? Chapter 264. Li Yunxin was happy to see the two quarreling. Hearing the ninth young master's words, he showed a hint of surprise on his face. But in front of Evil King, the ninth young master's words made him believe it. Hatred said that the person beside him was a cultivator. He had thought so for a long time. If he wasn't a cultivator, how would he know how to use the ancient scroll in his hand? How could he activate the spiritual power in the scroll? As a great monster king of the mysterious realm, it was the first time for him to quarrel with a human. Now that he caught a glimpse of the slightly panicked expression on the face of this Dragon 9, he felt even more delighted. Suddenly, he felt that it was more interesting not to kill him immediately, but to make him more and more frightened. It was a new world that he had never experienced before. So he opened his mouth and said, You think I don't know? Not only is he a cultivator, but he is also a Taoist painter. Hey, your ninth brother has told me everything. If I don't tell you, how can I find your weakness and take your life? When he said these words, the ninth young master was slightly stunned. He looked at Li Yunxin and then at Evil King, and didn't say anything for a long time. Evil King saw his expression and knew that he believed it. Since he believed it, he had achieved his goal. He turned to look at Li Yunxin, and then showed a happy smile. He whispered, I was wondering why you like to lie to people. It turns out that you are so happy. It's a pity that I am happy now, but you are crying. Hee. If your brother believes me, guess how he will treat you later? Li Yunxin blinked. Evil King laughed again. I don't know where you come from. You are the son of Shinryu, the fake dragon's son. But since you call each other brothers and are dragons, hey, I don't want to kill you with my own hands. It will be troublesome if the old dragon comes to find trouble with me. Now someone actually delivered himself to my door to do this for me. Ha ha ha. I'll throw you out and watch you brothers kill each other. He stopped laughing and suddenly raised his eyebrows. He said fiercely, That's what's more enjoyable. As soon as he finished speaking, Li Yunxin suddenly felt his body lighten. The restraints on his joints had been removed, but his mind was still numb, and his mouth could not speak. The evil king didn't let him speak. He raised his hand, as if he was going to throw Li Yunxin out. However, Li Yunxin took a step back and leaned against the stone wall, quickly carving a few words with his finger. The evil king did not want to see what he had written. He had experienced this person's methods before. He didn't even know what method he used or when he used it, but he almost fell into his trap. How could he not be careful? Therefore, he activated his divine ability and reached out to grab Li Yunxin again, and was about to throw him away. However, although he did not want to see it, the words were right behind Li Yunxin. The engraving was deep and large, but it still came into view. The evil king glanced at it, and was shocked, because he saw that what Li Yunxin had engraved was, "You have a spy here." He was slightly stunned. The evil king was not a stupid demon. If he was stupid, Li Yunxin's method of deceiving him would not work. It always needed a smart person to think more, so that he could play tricks. So when he saw this word, his heart skipped a beat. He had previously known some things about this Dragon 9, through some information channels. For example, he was now in the true state. When the person who gave him the information told him those things, he was skeptical. Today, when he saw Li Yunxin with his own eyes, he knew that it was true. But the problem was that the information was true, and the person might not be trustworthy. Now that he saw Li Yunxin engraving such words in his anxious expression, he could not help but hesitate. He saw that Li Yunxin kept blinking, as if he had something to say. So he weighed the two choices of throwing it out now, and listening for a while. Finally, he waved his hand, and removed the seal in Li Yunxin's mouth. He heard Li Yunxin immediately say in a deep voice, "You have a spy here. That hatred outside is indeed here to seek revenge. If you didn't have a spy here, how would he know my whereabouts?" When Li Yunxin said this, he meant it. This was indeed the question in his heart. But on the other hand, he really needed the evil king to remove the seal in his mouth, so that he could deal with the upcoming situation. However, his sincere words were taken as an excuse by the evil king. The great demon sneered, "I was wondering what you wanted to say. So it's this. Hey, how would you know? Think about it in your next life." After saying this, he suddenly threw Li Yunxin. Suddenly, a hole appeared in the misty seven-colored light at the cave entrance. Li Yunxin was thrown out like a rock by him, and the colorful light closed up immediately. After a breath, Li Yunxin stood firm on the ground. He was only 3 steps away from hatred. The 9th young master stared at him like a poisonous snake, revealing a dangerous smile. Hatred was a demon in the mysterious realm, which was even higher than the evil king. Therefore, he was not worried that the person in front of him would escape from his hands. And this Li Yunxin seemed to know that he had nowhere to escape. He sighed slightly and stood still. The 9th young master smiled, clasped his hands behind his back, and walked around him. Then he came to the front of him, and looked him up and down carefully, saying, "What a good little man. Who would have thought that it would be like this? When I saved you that night, you were like a drowning dog. Who would have thought that a few months later, you would actually kill this young master?" He stretched out a finger and scratched Li Yunxin's face. But the body of dragons was strong, so it only left a few white marks on his face. TSK, you have a beautiful face, but your heart is too bad. Now you are in my hands. Tell me, what should I do with you?" After saying this, he narrowed his eyes. This was one of the expressions that the 9th young master liked. And this expression meant that some dangerous emotion was about to break out, and then there might be a storm. Li Yunxin knew him well, so he also knew that the 9th young master, who had been hurt by him, was willing to tell him the truth. So he sighed softly. "If I say I don't want to, you won't believe me. Do you remember when I asked you to find trouble with Ling Kongzi by the Wei River? At that time, I did remember for a moment the many things you did for me, and I didn't want to hurt you." The 9th young master narrowed his eyes and grinned, showing his fangs. And then, Li Yunxin raised his head and stared at him. "You told me that you ate Miss Yin alive." The 9th young master was stunned. He blinked a few times, and looked at Li Yunxin. After a while, he suddenly got close to him, almost touching his nose. "Because of a person?" Li Yunxin didn't dodge, but looked back at him. "I told you before, 9th young master. I told you that Lu Laodao was my friend, and I told you not to eat him. But Miss Yin was also my friend, and you ate her. I told you before. If you really treat me as a friend, why did you eat my friend?" The 9th young master looked at him in disbelief. After a while, He suddenly turned around and walked away, then turned back. How would I know? You have so many human friends. This person is also your friend, and that person is also your friend. How would I know? If you didn't tell me, how would I know? His tone gradually became hurried, and in the end, he was almost roaring in a low voice. Fine scales appeared on his cheeks, and his body began to emit a light red mist. But the mist was hot, like the air of fire. But Li Yunqing was still calm. He looked at the ninth young master's face for a while, and then turned to look at the entrance of the pitting mountain not far away. The demons and the evil king were still there, watching with great interest. They were just watching, but they didn't seem to hear what they were talking about. They just stretched their necks, and their faces were full of excitement. Maybe the ninth young master didn't want others to hear their conversation, so he used some magical power. He was silent for a while, and then said, "So that's the problem." He looked at the ninth young master seriously. "If I don't tell you, you won't know. But I can't tell everyone everything. You see people as pigs, dogs, and ants, and you eat them. And I was also a human at that time. So we were not suitable from the beginning." The ninth young master was furious. He stared at Li Yunqing and shouted angrily, "It's you! You said you wanted to be my friend!" He was so angry that dense scales covered his whole face. His body expanded in an instant, almost revealing his god-fiend body. But his godly demon body was the godly demon body of hatred. Different from Long Jiu's, he was golden. Dazzling golden scales covered his entire body, and an even more brilliant golden mane covered his neck and back. Even his horns were dazzling, but they weren't coral antlers. They were two sharp horns like swords, pointing straight to the sky. He stood in front of Li Yunqing like a giant beast, and from his nostrils red and thick clouds of fire. Li Yunqing's hair began to burn in the fire clouds. But he didn't seem to feel the pain. He looked up at the ninth young master, and said word by word, "Yes. I said I wanted to be your friend first. But I lied to you. I lied to you. And I don't feel good in my heart. So for the sake of our past friendship, I advise you leave quickly. The evil king and I have set up a big formation in the Pitfall Mountain. You can't do anything to me. And the me standing in front of you now is the real body of my soul. My real body is still in the Pitfall Mountain. Just now, I asked the evil king to let me come out and say these words to you because of our friendship. You killed the me in front of you, and I only lost some of my cultivation. But you may not be able to escape. Don't tell me you want to die again?" Li Yunqing once again stabbed his heart with a sharp knife. So the big demon in front of him finally lost all his senses, and became completely and madly angry. He didn't say anything, and suddenly raised his hand, and hit Li Yunqing's skull. With a bang, the body in front of him turned into a pile of meat. Chapter 265. The demons in the cave couldn't hear what the two were talking about. But when they saw that hatred was getting angrier, they knew that things weren't going well. However, sympathy was a very rare thing for the demons. Therefore, when they saw the scene in front of them, they were stunned for a moment before they burst into thunderous cheers. Dragons killing each other. How many people could witness such a scene? Even the evil king was slightly stunned. He originally thought that the two might turn against each other. But who knew that they would really turn against each other? And Long Air really killed Long Jiu without hesitation. After a moment of shock, he also laughed wildly, thinking, "Hey, that kid actually played tricks in front of me. Now he also knows. How can I be easy to deal with? This is called lifting a rock only to drop it on one's own feet." He laughed wildly for a while, causing the two big teeth in his mouth and the two big horns on his head to tremble. He could only wait to see Long Air leave with his tail between his legs. After all, it was an internal fight between the two brothers. And now that there was no evidence, what did it have to do with his Pitfall Mountain? But it was funny that Long Jiu was too smart for his own good, and actually provoked a demon with both wisdom and courage. But the next moment, the laughter and cheers in the cave slowly became sparse. Because that hatred seemed to be a little strange. He killed Long Jiu with one palm. Then he looked over here. Hatred, who had revealed his demon body, seemed to have a raging flame burning in his eyes. He stared at the entrance of the Pitfall Mountain in a daze for 2 or 3 breaths. and suddenly let out an earth-shaking roar. "Get out of here!" As soon as his voice fell, Hatred turned around and pounced over. It was a kind of terrifying aura, like a mountain purgatory. It was the aura of a super big demon that belonged to the realm of profound life. When he moved, it was as if the whole world moved with him. The air around him turned scarlet in an instant, as if the flames in his eyes were burning the very air itself. Hatred left a trail of flames wherever he went. His face was distorted and terrifying in the red-hot mist. His fingertips seemed to be made of freshly forged steel. Before the evil king could react, Hatred had already crashed into the restrictive spell of the Pitfall Mountain. The tremors and rumbles this time could not be mentioned in the same breath as the previous three. At the point of contact, the colorful light instantly dimmed and almost disappeared. Yazi's sharp claws pierced into the barrier in the raging flames. The evil king could almost see that his red and shiny fingertips had broken through the barrier a little. Then, like a wild beast, Yazi tightly clasped the invisible barrier with both of his hands, and then roared at the sky and began to tear the barrier with all his might. Flames rose from his body and soared into the sky. The pillar of fire was like a sharp sword that pierced through the heavens, and it would not stop until it cut through the restrictions of the Pitfall Mountain. The monster kings in the cave were all dumbfounded by the great demon's rage. After a moment of daze, these demons were all scared out of their wits. Like headless flies, they fled in all directions. This was the first time they had witnessed the wrath of the Dragon Clan. Furthermore, this furious Dragon Clan was the strongest expert below the Grand Supreme Realm, the vast life mystical realm. They did not have the time to think about why Hatred was so furious. They just wanted to find a hole and hide in it, so that they would not be implicated. Only the evil king was dumbfounded. Hatred was only 3 steps away from him outside the restrictive spell. He had seen Long Air's face and actions clearly, but he didn't know, where did Long Air's anger come from? Or in other words, why did he vent all his anger on him? When he said, "Get out here," wasn't that directed at her? This was too much. He raised his eyebrows when he saw the restriction of Pitfall Mountain being torn apart by Yazi, almost tearing a crack in the void. However, Hatred's divine power seemed to be limited. He could only tear a small crack, and could not expand it. Once he was not careful, the crack would close up. Hatred would fly back, and stare at the inside of the cave with his burning eyes. Then, he would pounce on the restrictions and tear them apart again. After this happened 3 or 4 times, the evil king was also frightened. At first, he only wanted to wait for Hatred to realize that he could not break the restrictions, and then leave. But Hatred was even more desperate, as if he wanted to die with him. He finally could not stand it anymore and shouted, "Hatred, don't be so ungrateful. You and I are both in the profound realm, and I have been managing this Pitfall Mountain for thousands of years. Do you really think you can defeat me here?" He was rational, but the 9th young master was not rational. He was a demon that had lived for thousands of years, and was also the king of all demons in the world. He condescended to save a person, a little person that he used to see as food. Then, he put down his pride, and sincerely wanted to make friends with that person for the first time. In the end, he was tricked to death by that lowly little thing, and his real body was taken away by him in some unknown way. That time was already a great humiliation that made him go crazy just thinking about it. But now, not only did that little thing not know how to repent, it even kept on saying that it was indeed a lie. Moreover, it had once again been tricked by him. Just now he killed the real body formed by his soul, and his real body was still in the Pitfall Mountain. This was not something that could be described as great humiliation. As a result, the originally impulsive and violent 9th young master had already lost all rationality because of Li Yunxin's meticulously arranged and calculated words. When Evil King's words fell into his ears, they were like the whistling of the wind. How could he understand the meaning behind them? He only thought of one thing: kill him, kill him, kill him. The pitiful Evil King thought that he had tricked Li Yunxin, but now he had jumped into his own trap without knowing it. Seeing that Hatred did not pay attention to his words, he felt that he had made up his mind to fight to the death with him. He was a 2,000-year-old demon king, a tyrant of a region. Even though he still had some doubts in his heart and felt a little puzzled, how could he lower his voice and reason with this crazy dragon boy at this juncture? He was tearing at his own door. If he tried to reason now, wouldn't the demon kings laugh at him for being a cowardly rat in front of the dragon son hatred? Therefore, the evil king let out a roar. Little ones, get into formation and tear this long worm apart. The whole Pitfall Mountain shook. 12 hours ago. 12 hours ago. Li Yunxin had just appeared in the desert of the Stone Forest Mountain. In the eyes of the snake spirit Qi Duanjin, he was just a white figure in the scorching air. At that time, Li Shan was still in the hall of the Myrtle Palace in the Lord Dongting Mountain, paying attention to the other Li Yunxin's every move. He was very puzzled as to why this guy was still playing around in such a dangerous situation. At first, when he heard Li Yunxin Lu Lao Dao by Yunxin, and the little servant girl sitting in a circle and saying things like Lord, loyal subject, traitor, etc., he thought they were discussing the current situation. But as he played with Mrs. Sanhua and listened carefully, he slowly realized that they were playing a strange game. Li Shan was a demon now, but as Tan Liang, she was not a demon in the past. She used to have many identities, so although her realm wasn't high, she was very knowledgeable. He knew that Li Yunxin was now in the true state. In the true state, it was possible to cultivate the magical power of soul incarnation. But as far as he knew, Li Yunxin had only been in the true state for a month. Logically speaking, it was impossible for him to cultivate such a magical power in such a short period of time. But he was knowledgeable after all. What if this person was very perceptive, a genius among geniuses, and really had a 1 in a million chance to cultivate it? Even if he could cultivate it, there were still many restrictions. Li Yunxin was now only in the realm of enlightened immortal, the lowest level of the true state. In this realm, the incarnation of the real body couldn't be more than 30 miles away from the original body. 30 miles. It was 100 miles away from the middle hall of the Ziwei Palace in Mount June to the nearest Dongting Lake. Even if he had an incarnation, he still couldn't get out of Dongting. Once he was far away, the real body would return to its original position. Thinking of this, she felt a little relieved. She just continued to watch him carefully. Like this, she stared at him for 6 hours. First, Lu Laodao seemed to be tired, so he proposed to take a break and get some food. However, Li Yunxin seemed to be having fun, and didn't hear it at all. Bai Yunxin was also tired of watching, so she said, "Let's go. Let's play another day." After saying that, she stood up. She stood up, and her maid followed her. So only Li Yunxin was still murmuring something excitedly. He refused to move, as if he had forgotten himself. He didn't even know that the other 3 had left the table. Seeing this scene, Li Shan instinctively frowned. Lu Laodao seemed to think of something. He hurriedly blocked Li Yunxin. He said, "Brother Xian, let's play another day." Then he helped him up and walked to the side hall. But Li Yunxin followed Lu Laodao and was still talking about the words he just said when they were playing. At this time, Li Shan finally took a deep breath and realized that something was wrong. The Li Yunxin, in front of him, was not the Li Yunxin he knew before. Rather than calling it a great demon, it would be more accurate to say that it was a puppet with a muddled mind. He immediately broke out in a cold sweat. He quickly found an excuse and said that he needed to leave for a while. That Sanhua was having fun with himself. He didn't know what he was mumbling to himself, so he didn't care about him, and just let him be. Li Shan left the main hall first, and then hid in the forest like a gust of wind. When he saw that there was no one around, he climbed up the steep rock wall, and took a huge risk to go around to the window of the side hall in the middle of the main hall, and poked his head out to take a look. He saw the Li Yunxin that was carried into the side hall by Lu Laodao turn into spots of light and dissipate in the air. He heard Lu Laodao sigh. "Sigh. I'm not good at Taoism. If Brother Xian were to draw, this figure wouldn't disappear even after 2 days." Chapter 266. Li Shan's head is buzzing. It's a dummy. Then where is the real Li Yunxin? He carefully and slowly retreats from the cliff in case of disturbing Lu Laodao. As soon as he gets to the ground, He immediately flies into the water. He avoids the demons guarding the periphery of Mount June and goes to the Sanhiku next to Dongting without stopping. There used to be Egret town near the Sanhiku with smooth roads and convenient transportation. Therefore, his senior fellow apprentice Fu Liangzi, who pretends to be Kun Wuzi, sends someone here to wait for possible news. Now it finally comes in handy. An emptiness realm cultivator is waiting there. He works very seriously. Li Shan sees him when he arrives at the lake. He immediately shouts, "Go back and report that Li Yunxin is missing." The cultivator is confused about why the great master asks him to wait for a message from a demon. But the authority of Kun Wuzi makes him suppress this doubt in his heart. At this moment he doesn't look down on Li Shan. Instead he listens carefully. After hearing that he asked again, "Is that all you have to say?" Only then did Li Shan compose himself. He carefully sized him up and said, "Who else knows that you are here?" The cultivator answers calmly, "My coming here is a secret of the great master. No one knows." Li Shan is relieved. He knows he can talk more with him. He thinks for a while and says, "Report to your great master that Li Yunxin is missing. He has disappeared for about 6 hours. He left a fake body in Dongting and lied to me for 6 hours. I guess he should be going to." The cultivator frowns slightly and raises his hand to interrupt him. "Wait a moment, Taoist friend." Then he takes out a figure from his sleeve and throws it out. The figure soon turns into ashes. Then he looks at Li Shan. "It seems to be very serious. I'll ask the great master to come in person." Li Shan can't help but look at him a few more times. This Taoist has an extraordinary temperament. Therefore he asks, "What's your name?" The Taoist salutes, "Song Yuezi." He doesn't speak anymore. Li Shan also becomes silent. But this silence didn't last long. A stream of light appeared on the horizon, and Kun Wuzi descended from the sky with strong winds, causing Song Yuzi's sleeves to flutter. Seeing that his sect leader had arrived, the Taoist priest bowed again and silently left. Li Shan wasn't in the mood to say anything else, and continued. "Up until now, Li Yunxin has already disappeared for 18 hours. He created a fake body on Mount June. I don't know if he sensed something was wrong." Kun Wuzi was slightly stunned, and then he said, "Soul transformation true body?" However, he quickly thought of what Li Shan had thought before, and denied his own thoughts. No, he's at the true realm, so his avatar won't be able to go too far and do nothing. Yes, I think I must have left Dongting in person. Didn't you find it? The exit was guarded by a Taoist priest. Let's not talk about this for now. Kun Wuzi frowned and paced back and forth with an ugly expression. After all, he wasn't the Kun Wu of the past. He might look exactly the same, but his state of mind and experience were much different. He wasn't a real and calm Xian realm cultivator. After pacing back and forth, he turned around and said, "Could it be that he went to Stone Forest Mountain?" "That's what I speculated too." Li Shan said, "He said something to me before. He probably said that he wanted to ask the big demons to besiege the city of Wei, so that you can kill them. Now it seems that he's probably going there. But I don't know if he already suspected me before. And if those words were to deceive me. Now, you have to make a decision." Kun Wuzi was stunned. "What decision?" Li Shan looked at him and sighed. "Li Yunxin is full of tricks. We don't know what he's going to do. He gave us the element of surprise, and we'll give him the element of surprise. We can only make plans after the situation is messed up. In my opinion, no matter what he does at Stone Forest Mountain, we have to make him fail." "You said that Kun Wuzi saw long air, and hatred seemed to have a grudge against him?" Kun Wuzi thought for a while, and his eyes brightened. "Yes. Tell that hatred that Li Yunxin is at Stone Forest Mountain. No matter what grudge they have, that Xian realm big demon will cause trouble if he goes there. This is easy. We set up a big tactical formation to find the remnant soul of Kun Wuzi. Although we didn't find him, we found the trace of hatred. I will send someone to inform him later." "There's another point," Li Shan said to Kun Wuzi through the inhibition of Dongting. "We have to catch all the people in Dongting. We used to think that Li Yunxin is a cruel and merciless demon. He can use anyone and abandon anyone. But according to my observations over the past few days, He still has feelings for me. Let's not talk about others. Just look at Lu Lao Dao Hunyuanzi. He values that old man very much. He is like a servant and a friend. And the few demons under his command are also loyal to him. I think he can't let them go. Catch them all and take them as hostages. If things change again, there will still be room for negotiation. Kuan Wuzi listened to Li Shan saying so much in one breath, and his face was a bit dull. After a while he sighed. What on earth have you been through these years? You are not the same person as before. You have become so decisive and fierce. Li Shan pursed his lips and wanted to say something but stopped. But soon he smiled. It's not a good time to be sad. We have to act quickly. I am now at the peak of the transcendent state. These days, I have been leading the demons in the lake, and I have a summer palace. Although it is not stable, it can be used. When Li Yunxin took me out of Dongting, I set the exit outside. You can come to Dongting from outside through my summer palace. Now there is only one big demon in the lake by Yunxin. If you come, it will be safe. Kuan Wuzi was stunned and then he frowned. Are you crazy? Although I am in the true state, my body is even stronger than that of the Xian state. With my cultivation, if I borrow the way from your summer palace to enter Dongting, the Reiki in my body will definitely attack your inner palace. How can the Reiki in your body contain my Reiki? It will seriously injure you. Maybe you will die. Li Shan stared at Kuan Wuzi for a while and suddenly sneered. Senior brother, these years, have you been living too comfortably? Kuan Wuzi was stunned, and he made a sound of confusion. Then he heard Li Shan's voice become cold and fierce. Do you know what kind of situation we are in now? You have all kinds of treasures in Daotong, and stand aloof from worldly affairs. But do you know how demons live? This is Dongting, not Yunshan. Li Yunxin is a sinister and cunning demon, and he is not a Xianmin cultivator. When you were in Yunshan, you felt that everything was under your control, and you could slowly plan. But now these days, the more I spend time with Li Yunxin, the more shocked I am. We underestimated him. If he really goes to Stone Forest Mountain now, it is very likely that he will bring back 1/3 of the demons in Qing Kingdom to attack the city of Wei. You only know that he has been quietly hiding in Dongting for so long. How do you know that he has not already made a plan, and is only waiting to kill us? Now the situation is completely out of control. We are going to start the final battle. The final battle. Either you die or I die. Have you forgotten how Ling Kongzi and Yunzi died? Did they still feel that everything was under their control even at the moment of their death? Kuan Wuzi was rendered speechless by his torrential interrogation. After a long time he sighed in a low voice. Okay. Junior brother, you are right. After a moment of silence he said in a low voice. But don't hurt her. Li Shan was slightly stunned and then immediately laughed. His tone suddenly became calm, and he stared at Kuan Wuzi. Okay. I know. She that Ling Kongzi. She stared at Kuan Wuzi for a while and said slowly. If we really find her, I will spare her life for you. Now gather your people, the people of Daotong, and the spies of our Freemasonry around here. Ask them to move. Everyone move. Okay. Kuan Wuzi said in a low voice. I will go back to the city of Wei to arrange something. After that, I will borrow your temporary imperial residence to enter Dongting. Li Shan looked at him. Go quickly. Therefore, for hours later, an emptiness realm cultivator found hatred. At this moment hatred was still hatred. He didn't want to cause more trouble. He was entrusted by the divine dragon, and had his own wishes. For a long time, he wandered around Dongting and the city of Wei, and watched the development of the situation. Therefore, he was quite surprised by the arrival of the Daotong cultivator. The messenger of Daotong told him that Li Yunxin is now in the Pitfall Mountain. At this time, this news was no longer a speculation. A spy like Tan Liangzhu, who was now among the demons in the Pitfall Mountain, was activated and quickly sent back information to confirm Li Shan's speculation. But the strange thing was that hatred didn't seem to be interested in it. At this time, he was lying on a big green stone in the forest and basking in the sun. He lazily stared at the Taoist priest who called himself Song Yuezi, and yawned. But what does it have to do with me? Song Yuezi was slightly stunned. According to the words of the great hierarch, Hatred should have gone to the Pitfall Mountain immediately after knowing the news. He might even vent his anger on him, because Kuan Wuzi had ambushed him before. That was a deep hatred. Therefore, this mission was extremely risky, and he could be killed by a moody demon in anger. But looking at Yazi now, it was indeed not the expected reaction at all. Song Yuezi suspected that he had leaked some information. Therefore, he stood under the big green stone and thought for a while. He said, "That Li Yunxin. It is said that he had a disagreement with the Lord Tongtian near Dongting. Now we got the news." Hatred stood up slightly and looked at him condescendingly and strangely. "Disagreement? Li Yunxin? You mean my 9th brother who calls himself Li Yunxin? He is my 9th brother, and also the dragon's. Where did the disagreement come from?" "Hey, you Taoist priest." The big demon narrowed his eyes dangerously. "Are you here to make fun of me? No wonder you are not afraid of me at all. You are up to no good." Song Yuezi was more and more confused. He felt that things were completely out of his control. He looked up to the west. The sun was about to set. Chapter 267. When the head priest ordered him to do this, he said it was extremely urgent. But the current situation, he couldn't do it? He frowned. "I am also a cultivator, not like those ignorant mortals." It was true that Lord of Tongtian was famous in the world. But if he was timid in front of Lord of Tongtian, it would be rude. But is the Lord Tongtian testing I? That's not necessary. This news is absolutely true. The Lord Tongtian will know when he goes to the Pitfall Mountain. Hatred didn't look at him anymore. He yawned lazily and lay back on the rock. Get lost. Song Yunzi wanted to say more, but Hatred waved his hand, as if he was shooing away a fly. He didn't see any strange phenomenon. But Song Yunzi suddenly felt a fierce blow to his chest, as if a small mountain was crushing down on him in an instant. He was greatly shocked and immediately circulated the spiritual energy in his body to protect himself. However, the full power of an emptiness realm cultivator was like dust in front of the casual attack of a profound realm great demon. In just one breath, Song Yunzi finally couldn't resist anymore. He spat out a mouthful of blood and lost consciousness. The sun finally set. When he woke up again, it was because of intense pain. It was as if his body was being torn apart by some kind of power, and his flesh was being torn off piece by piece. The pain spread from his arm to every corner of his body. Even in his coma, he couldn't help but let out a shrill scream. He suddenly opened his eyes and sat up. Then he realized that wasn't an illusion or a dream. One of his arms was held in Hatred's hand. The sky was dark, but the forest was silent. Even the mosquitoes didn't dare to buzz. There was a bonfire under the rock, but the fire could only light up a small area. The surrounding area was filled with the shadows of the trees, as if they were ghosts. But now the arm he was holding was dripping with blood. His forearm was almost to the bone. It was not a cut or a bruise, but it was cut by Dragon Sun's hatred with his sharp nails, and then tore off his muscles with 2 fingers. Song Yuzi was stunned. Although the pain was still intense, he had regained consciousness. It was also because he regained consciousness that he realized he was being eaten. He was eaten alive. Hatred's face was right in front of her. His eyes shone brightly in the flickering firelight. There were still traces of blood at the corner of his mouth, and he was chewing slowly, as if he was eating some dried fruit while looking at himself calmly. The devoured cultivator and the devoured demon stared at each other for a while. Then, Song Yuzi clenched his teeth and widened his eyes, because while Hatred was staring at him calmly, he tore off another piece of muscle. Song Yuzi clearly heard the sound of his flesh being torn off his arm by the demon. It was the first time he knew. It sounded like tearing cloth. The demon raised his head slightly and put the bloody flesh in his hand into his mouth, but his eyes were fixed on Song Yuzi the whole time. After watching for a while and swallowing the mouthful, he laughed. Cultivators really do have to taste better. It's chewy, not like the rotten meat of mortals. But if you don't scream now, you'll be choking your breath in your lungs, and it will sour my delicious food. Sweat oozed from Yunzi's forehead like rain, soaking his hair and clothes. But the demon's hand seemed to be made of steel. It held him firmly. The emptiness realm Taoist didn't dare to act rashly. He could only grit his teeth and bear the pain. He widened his eyes. Why did Lord Tongtian eat me? Then Song Yuzi found that hatred was stunned. Although it was only for a short moment, he knew that his eyes wouldn't lie to him. It was as if his words had evoked the past in the demon's heart. His hand and expression froze together. Then the demon suddenly narrowed his eyes and stared at him carefully for a while, saying, "You are interesting." He stopped. He didn't want to eat him for the time being. Song Yuzi didn't know why his words had such an effect. He just wanted to be tough and calm to buy some time for himself. But since it was effective, he clenched his teeth again and didn't look at the terrible wound on his arm. "I'm here to send a message to Lord Tongtian. When two countries fight, they don't kill envoys. If Lord Tongtian kills me today..." But he was surprised to find that hatred suddenly frowned with a puzzled look. What message? Song Yuzi was stunned. He didn't know if this temperamental demon was making fun of him. But he still forced himself to be spirited, pretending that he had never spoken to Yuzi before, and repeated Yuzi's words word for word. Then he found that Lord Tongtian was absent-minded again. He was staring at him, but obviously his mind was not on him. It was as if the demon had passed through his body and seen far away, and things that happened a long time ago. After a while, the demon's focus returned to Song Yuzi. The demon grinned, showing his sharp teeth. "Li Yunxin, yes." Song Yuzi gritted his teeth and tried to calm himself down, because he found that hatred liked this kind of calmness in the face of danger. "Since Lord Tongtian has received the message, how about letting me go? I've entertained you with flesh and blood. Now it's time to go back and report." But hatred didn't let him go. He smiled again. "Interesting. Interesting. I've seen such an interesting little guy before. And I've seen the second one tonight." Hearing this, Song Yuzi was delighted. He knew that things might work out. So he became calmer and even tried to force himself to treat hatred as a friend. "Since you're interesting, why not make friends? Lord Tongtian usually..." His words came to an abrupt end. At the moment when he heard the word friend, hatred's eyes suddenly burst with a terrible light. She pulled Song Yuzi in front of her and bit his neck. The Taoist's cervical vertebrae were immediately bitten off, and his breath was instantly cut off. Blood gushed out from the neck and splashed all over hatred's face, but he didn't care. Instead, he shook his head fiercely like a real beast and bit the Taoist's neck until it was completely bitten off. The Taoist's head rolled on the ground. Then he threw the headless body next to the bonfire and gritted his teeth. "Friend? Bah! You don't deserve it." Then he soared into the sky and flew towards the direction of Pitfall Mountain. After the meeting between Li Shan and Kun Wazi, and before Song Yuzi found hatred, there were some other disturbances beside Dongting Lake. It didn't refer to the shore of the lake, but the surroundings of Dongting. The cause of the incident started from the Su family in Su Town. The Su Town where Su Weng used to live. The head of the family, Su Zhizhang, and the key figures of the family took a gaily painted boat to Dongting to celebrate his father Su Weng's birthday. However, the boat was caught in a storm. Then the Dongting was blocked by some invisible force, and no one could get in or out. Everyone knew that this was a dangerous business, but after all, the head of the family still had some power, so it was peaceful for a few days. But after half a month, they couldn't hold back anymore. The Su family was originally a business with a huge amount of wealth. But in such an era, if one didn't have power, then the more wealth he had, the more dangerous it would be. The Su family was different from the Yu family. The Yu family didn't have many descendants, and they got rich late. Even though they had a big family, they really had no foundation. However, the Su family had been building power for a long time, in a covert way. The descendants of the Su family went to school, but they didn't take the imperial examinations. They read classics and history since childhood, and they also learned the way of business and life. When there was a chance, they would go out to be an advisor. The officials of the Qing kingdom always worked in different places. The officials had no foundation when they came to a foreign place. Without the support of the local powerful families, it was difficult for them to do anything. And the Su family was naturally a first-class power in the states and prefectures near Dongting. With smooth connections and rich family property, it was possible for the descendants of the Su family to curry favor in the officialdom. Moreover, they did have enough talent to handle many things behind the scenes. Therefore, in the states and prefectures near Dongting, advisor of the Su family was a famous signboard. The ignorant people of the Qing kingdom liked to say, the Daqing state belongs to the Zhao family. And some people near Dongting also said that the 4 states and 16 prefectures belonged to the Su family. Now such a big family lost its leader. Naturally, there would be many people fighting for it. Half a month after Su Zhizhang disappeared, the drama of fighting for power and profit took place in the mansion, making this first-class rich and powerful family restless. There was no peace for a day. Nearby officials with a little ambition were happy to see the chaos. A strong and powerful Su family would make it convenient for them to do things. But no one liked to be controlled by an invisible force and lose freedom. With such complicated and contradictory thoughts, they watched the joke for more than a month. But one day, they were surprised to find that all the disputes disappeared. The Su family seemed to have elected a new patriarch in a single night. What was strange was that the new head of the family was a son of a concubine named Su Ziyuan, who was not very popular one day ago. No one knew how such a young man became the head of the family. Some curious people went to inquire, but they couldn't find out anything. Some officials had advisors who were members of the Su family, so they beat around the bush to ask their advisor's opinion. Although the answers they got were expressed in different ways, the general meaning was the same. They had no objection to it. These people from the Su family were truly monsters. No wonder they could be powerful for 200 years. But the strange thing didn't end there. Soon people learned of another thing. The young man named Su Ziyuan claimed that he was the former head of the Su family, Su Zhizhang, who disappeared in Dongting Lake more than a month ago. Chapter 268. When the news came out, it was at night. On this night far, far away, in a place called Pitfall Mountain, 2 powerful fiendish demons were fighting. But how could the ignorant people know that this has anything to do with the Pitfall Mountain, the city of Wei, and the Dongting Lake? They only knew that the new head of the family, Su Ziyuan, suddenly fainted that night. It was said that he was in a coma for 4 hours. Then he sat up straight on the bed in everyone's eyes. But his spirit and temperament were completely different. He looked at the people around him coldly with a straight face and then shouted, "Where are the others?" At that time, there were only 2 doctors, 4 maids and 3 manservants around him. This new head of the family didn't have enough authority to convince the public. It was said that the reason why he could get this position was the result of some people in the family weighing the pros and cons. They thought that if the Su family continued to fight like this, it would be better to elect a puppet and let everyone discuss everything. Thus, this puppet was suffering from an acute illness. Why would it be in a hurry? But then things became different. Su Ziyuan, whose temperament and tone changed, claimed that he was Su Zhizhang. At first, everyone thought he was having a fit. But Su Ziyuan soon revealed a lot of secrets that only Su Zhizhang knew. Only then did the people panic. All the housekeepers of the nearby families rushed to Su Ziyuan's place overnight to ask questions. Not only did Su Ziyuan clearly explain Su Zhizhang's habits and hobbies, he even picked out the important internal secrets of the family and the various arrangements. There were many things that even the stewards of the various branches didn't know about. After 4 hours, people finally believed that the Su Ziyuan in front of them was Su Zhizhang. As for why it was like this, Su Zhizhang told him a mystical story. The Su family and people in the nearby state knew the rumor that Su San, the ancestor of the Su family, made a fortune. It was said that Su San was fishing in Dongting Lake. He cast a net and caught a rusty copper bottle. He opened the copper bottle, and a water god floated out from the bottle. The water god called himself the 10th young master and was the descendant of the divine dragon. When he went to the heaven with the dragon, he secretly ate the steamed bun made by the Queen of Heaven for the heaven sovereign. Therefore, he was sealed in that bottle and thrown into Dongting. Long Sun thanked Su San for saving him, so he wanted to fulfill his 3 wishes. Su San was not a greedy person. His first wish was for the Daqing state to be fair, prosperous, civilized, and harmonious. His second wish was for the people of the Qing kingdom to be patriotic, dedicated, honest, and friendly. His third wish was his own. He hoped to get some money, so that he could get a wife. The 10th young master of the water god felt that Su San was a very good person, so he gave him a lot of money and treasures. Thus, the Su clan became prosperous. Everyone knew about this rumor, but they just treated it as a rumor. But now Su Zhizhong, who had possessed Su Ziyuan, said that he had seen the 10th young master again. According to him, the pleasure boat encountered a huge storm that day, and the boat capsized. He fell into the water and lost consciousness. Nobody knew where he had drifted to. Then, he was suddenly awakened by someone. When he opened his eyes, he saw a solemn and dignified deity lifting him up and placing him on the shore. This deity claimed to be the descendant of the 10th young master of the lake water god and the dragon god. He said that he had once had a close relationship with Su Zhizhong's ancestor. There had been a storm in the lake, so he was patrolling the lake and happened to see him fall into the water. He then asked Su Zhizhong and found out that he was the descendant of Su San. Thus, he did not hesitate to violate the laws of heaven to save Su Zhizhong. However, Su Zhizhong's body was already completely destroyed, and his soul could not return. Thus, the water god invited Black Bai Yanjun. Black Bai Yanjun took out the book of life and death to look. It said that the Su family had a person called Su Ziyuan. In his previous life, he was an evil person, so his life was short in this life. However, the karma of this life was over, and he was about to die. Coincidentally, he could make a body for Su Zhizhong. Naturally, Su Zhizhong did everything he could to refuse, but the water god would not listen to him. So he begged Black Bai Yanjun to extend Su Zhizhong's life. The Yama king could not bear the water god's kindness, so he took Su Zhizhong's soul back and threw it into Su Ziyuan's body. However, this time, the water god had overstepped his duty and interfered with life and death. Therefore, according to the laws of heaven, he would be tied to the immortal beheading platform and struck to death by lightning. However, Black Bai Yanjun said that the 10th young master was returning a favor from the past, and there was a reason for it. Therefore, if many people in the lower realm could pray for the 10th young master and offer incense, once the celestial emperor was touched, the 10th young master might be able to escape the calamity. Su Zhizhong, who possessed Su Ziyuan, told such a strange story, which was hard to believe. However, if he believed that Su Ziyuan's body was really Su Zhizhong, what did it matter if he believed it or not? Therefore, the Su family spread the news overnight, and there was no lack of even more bizarre processing. When the heavens were about to light up, everyone in Su Town knew about it. The Su family seemed to really want to repay the kindness of the 10th young master of the water god. Not only did the people of Su Town know, but they also sent many servants to all directions to tell everyone they met. The villagers who were not knowledgeable might think that old master Su really wants to repay the kindness. However, the more knowledgeable people, such as the officials in the government, saw something else. Let's not talk about whether this Su Zhizhong was real or not. Even if it was fake, it seemed that the infighting had indeed stopped after the Su family released such news. The ignorant commoners only saw miraculous things, but they saw deeper. The Su family used this method to announce that the family's power structure had stabilized, and now they spread the news in all directions, in order to dispel those who had ulterior motives and were plotting against them. The news itself was absurd, but this was probably because the Su family only wanted to convey an attitude. Since the situation had stabilized, the officials could no longer watch the show. In addition, the advisors by their side had indeed told them some truths that made these old masters unhappy, but were indeed very useful. For example, the officials of the state government usually received a lot of benefits from the Su family. But a few days ago, when the Su family suffered a great disaster, they didn't help them. Instead, they allowed all kinds of evil people to mess up the situation. If it were an ordinary aristocratic family, the masters wouldn't have cared about their thoughts. However, the Su family was a first-class tyrant, and it wasn't as if there had never been a precedent of disobedient local officials being pushed out openly or secretly. It was not a wise move to offend such a family. Therefore, they had to do something to show their attitude. For example, if the Su family wanted to mobilize those ignorant villagers to pray and protect, They would not care about it. Some people accepted this suggestion, but some did not want to buy it. However, those who did not want to buy it soon found that things were not under their control. When dawn came, many people swore that they had received the 10th young master of the water god in their dreams last night. They said that he had saved Su Zhizhang and was being punished by thunder, hoping that they could worship and pray for him. After all, he would protect one side in the future and give them a lot of good karma. These people were distributed in all directions, and there were nearly 100 of them. They were not the Su family in the courtyard with high walls, but the villagers who seemed to have nothing to do with the Su family. This method might seem childish and laughable to some people, but in the short period of a few hours from the night before yesterday to the morning of the next day, indeed, a lot of people were stirred up. It was not only because of the strange things in the Su family, and some people did dream of the god, but also because the Su family said that anyone who was willing to pray for the 10th young master of the water god would be given one tael of silver. There were more than 2 million people in 4 states and 16 prefectures. How many families were there? The Su family was throwing away money like this. It was as if they were going to lose all of their wealth. At this time, even the most rational people had to try to believe that it was indeed because Su Zhizhang piously wanted to repay the kindness. Therefore thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people's power of faith began to gather in Dongting Lake because of this terrible, desperate and powerful mobilization ability on the body of 10th young master Li Shan. At this moment, Li Shan was somewhere by Dongting Lake. He didn't dare to return to Mount June. But if they already suspected him, it didn't matter now. The raid would be launched soon. Moreover, he had also received information from the spy in the Pitfall Mountain. Li Yunxin was killed by hatred. It was a shocking and unbelievable news. Both Li Shan and Kunwu couldn't believe it. The leader of Langya Cave abode, the real Kunwu, who was stronger than Li Yunxin, suddenly died. But that was the result of Fu Yangzi's secret operation and arrangement. In fact, it could be said that he had been preparing for 46 years, since the day he lurked in the orthodoxy. But the thing about Li Yunxin, he went to Pitfall Mountain by himself. Even with the help of the two of them, hatred of Dragon Sun also went. But Li Yunxin was a sinister and cunning person. Would he really die like this? Therefore, Li Shan and Kunwu met again, and came to a conclusion that was hard for them to accept. That Li Yunxin probably cultivated his soul into the real body. He went to Pitfall Mountain with his real body, and then his real body was killed. But this also meant that Li Yunxin's real body was not in Dongting Lake. The real body of a cultivator at the level of enlightened master must not be more than 30 miles away from the real body. If Li Yunxin's doppelganger went to Pitfall Mountain, then the real body must be within 30 miles of Pitfall Mountain. This was a conservative deduction made by someone who didn't want to believe that Li Yunxin really died like this. Then the plan should continue. If Li Yunxin died, it would be safe. But it was a pity that they couldn't capture him and interrogate him about some things. If Li Yunxin didn't die and only his doppelganger was killed, then things would be even smoother. If the real body was killed, the real body would be greatly injured, and his personal ability would plummet. Even if Li Yunxin was still in the real state, he would be a very weak one. If they captured the people in Dongting Lake, he would never be able to do anything. Therefore, at this moment, Li Shan stood on the surface of Dongting Lake, carefully feeling the strange pleasure of the countless weak power of faith gathering into his body. He was at the peak of the transcendent state. Now, he felt that he was going to become the second real state in this lake. After waiting for so many years, this day finally came. Chapter 269. In the early morning, there is a thin mist over Dongting. But then the sun rises and the mist slowly disappears. It is already the end of September. Although the weather is not cold, it is still slightly cool in the morning and evening. Dew gathers on the leaves of the plants on Mount June Island, and the ground in the forest is also slightly wet. It is very quiet. Ziwei Palace on Mount June is also quiet. There is no one here. Bai Yunxin and her maid left at dawn. Only Lu Laodao, Sanhua, and the nominal owner of this place, Red Lady, are left in the hall. A cultivator and 2 demons don't need a lot of sleep. But a cultivator and 2 demons don't have anything interesting to do. Therefore, the 3 of them do their own things. Lao Dao is practicing the nature will righteous spell. He is trying to nourish the inner courtyard of the Purple Mansion, hoping that one day he can go to a higher level. Sanhua is also practicing. But Lao Dao can't understand her way of doing it. He only thinks she is playing. She used to be a Yin spirit without a body. Although her words are strange, her logic is still clear. But now she has this body. She doesn't look like a normal person anymore. Lao Dao doesn't know why. As usual, Red Lady lives in the back hall at a higher place. She only shows up occasionally to patrol around Mount June Island. Then she either drinks or stays in the room. In short, it is a seemingly boring morning. But the other 3 don't think so. Kuan Wuzi flicks his fingertips a few times to destroy the magic circle eye. At the same time, he carefully suppresses the wacken that is running around, so that it won't give birth to abnormal signs or warnings. Snake Monster 7 Duanjin and Li Shan are guarding him. Seeing that he stops, they ask, "How is this magic circle?" Kuan Wuzi looks up and gently breathes. Now the 3 of them are halfway up Mount June, surrounded by lush and dense forests. Looking up like this, they can see a little blue sky in the forest at night, and the middle hall of Ziwei Palace that is higher against the blue sky. A corner of the golden cornice rises from the cliff, shining in the sun. He glanced at it before saying, "That was close." Then he frowned and said, "It seems that Li Yunqin really isn't here. This formation is extremely exquisite. They entered Dongting 2 hours ago. With the weak power of will of hundreds of thousands of people in the 4 states and 16 prefectures around Dongting, Li Shan finally breaks through from the peak of the transcendent realm to the real realm. As a result, the spiritual energy in his body became denser, and the temporary imperial residence became more sturdy. Finally, Kuan Wuzi and Qi Duanjin were lured in. Then, logically speaking, he should immediately break into the Emperor's Star Palace and capture the people in the palace. That was what he thought as well. But once they stepped into Mount June, they immediately felt powerful restrictions and several arrays. The method of setting up the formation was familiar yet strange. It was similar to Daodong's method, but the method was different. Kuan Wuzi had also come into contact with the Kinzo people, and knew that it was not the Kinzo Dharma. Therefore, she knows that it must be set up by Li Yunqin before he left Dongting. This array formation was like a spider web after spider web. Although it couldn't block the power of lightning, it would still make it difficult for people to move. They didn't know how many arrays there were in front of them. Once they rushed in rashly, they would be in a dilemma. It would be a joke. Moreover, Li Yunqin was insidious and cunning. It was better to be safe. Therefore, the powerful lineup of 2 real realms and 1 transcendent realm chose to break the inhibition step by step and advance slowly. Soon they realized that their choice was right. Li Yunqin was a pervert. So far, they had broken 34 arrays, and they didn't know how many arrays there were. If they had underestimated the enemy and rushed in directly, let alone whether they could get away or not, the people in the palace would have enough time to escape. He really had the time and the thought to create so many things on this mountain, and the arrays were very exquisite and insidious. If Kuan Wuzi hadn't learned enough experience, understanding, and knowledge left by the predecessors in Daotong in the past 46 years, he would have fallen into the enemy's trap more than once. However, it also meant that Li Yunqin was really not in Dongting now. It also meant that Li Shan's inference was right. The demon cared so much about the people in the palace that he even spent so much effort to protect them. However, no matter how many arrays there were, the number was limited. For hours later, the 3 of them stepped on the square in front of the middle hall of Ziwei Palace. They met with Lu Laodao in the field. Laodao was practicing the cloud hands of water cloud power at that time. He turned around and saw the 3 of them coming out of the forest beside the square. The 4 of them looked at each other for 1 second. Laodao didn't panic or escape. He raised his hand and took out a figure from his sleeve. He shook it in the air and it burned out. Then he pointed his sword at the 3 of them and shouted, "Go!" But nothing happened. Lao Dao immediately realized that there was something wrong with the arrays on Mount June. He didn't dare to be brave anymore. He turned around and took 2 steps back. He raised his hand and threw out another piece of figure. He was an emptiness realm cultivator. Compared with the wild Taoists he used to be friends with, he was already a great master. But in the eyes of these 3, what was the difference between an emptiness realm cultivator and a defenseless child in the mortal world? The figure released by an emptiness realm cultivator was nothing more than a gentle breeze. Kun Wuzi didn't make a move. The 7th level transcendent realm cultivator, who had the lowest cultivation level, had a chance to show off. The snake spirit, who had been hiding in the Pitfall Mountain for many years, sneered and stepped forward. She was about to use her strong body to break the figure. But after taking 1 step forward, she felt something was wrong. Once the figure was burned out, a large number of golden-armored strong men appeared in the sky. They shouted in unison, then took out their weapons and slashed down. Li Shan hurriedly shouted, "Be careful!" He and Kun Wuzi had been hiding in Daotong, so they knew what it was. It was a talisman created by a cultivator at the peak of the transcendent realm. It could summon the immortal generals at any time. When Ling Kongzi wanted to kill the 9th young master, he summoned this thing. 7th Duanjin was not a dragon's, and there were too many of these strong men. If he was not careful, he might be seriously injured. Li Shan shouted at her to retreat, then flew forward to receive the blow. Sparks flew all over his body, and his flesh was almost cut open. Who knew that this was not the end? The old Taoist threw out a talisman to summon the golden-armored strongman, but his hands did not stop moving. He took out a few scrolls from his sleeve and threw them over without looking at them. The scrolls burned in the air and turned into a green-armored swordsman. The swordsman shouted, "My sword is your sword." Then he attacked like a gust of wind. Another strong man wearing armor and holding a huge sword landed on the ground. He chanted a strange spell. "I need a horse." The huge sword released a burst of golden light and rushed over with a roar. The 2 of them looked like humans, but there was a grayish-green fish-headed monster with a mouth full of fangs. It held a half-moon scimitar full of saw teeth. There was also a demon with a rat's head holding a short crossbow. There was also a big bird that looked like it was formed from ice crystals. It opened its mouth and shot out an icicle. This time, even Kun Wuzi's eyes widened. He didn't know what kind of monsters they were. Thus, he didn't dare to let his guard down and also rushed over. After Lu Laodao threw out many treasures, he escaped into the hall like a gust of wind. Li Shan and Kun Wuzi blocked these monsters, and only asked 7th Duanjin to go around and chase after them. Unexpectedly, when they fought, they realized that the 5 aggressive monsters that appeared later were actually good to look at but useless. They were like mortals who had learned martial arts. The talisman of the true realm cultivator struck out, and it immediately turned into specks of light in the air. The dozens of golden-armored warriors, on the other hand, caused the 2 of them to expend some effort, but it only took them 3 breaths of time. The 2 were stunned for a moment, and also chased after them. With Lu Laodao's cultivation, he wouldn't be able to summon those golden-armored strong men. It could be seen that these treasures were left for him by Li Yunxin. Although that Lao Dao's strength wasn't good, he was calm in the face of danger. Unfortunately, no matter how calm he was, he couldn't fight against a true state cultivator. Like a shooting star chasing after the moon, Kun Wuzi crashed straight into the hall of the middle hall. That old Taoist Lu still wanted to stretch his hand into his sleeves. Kun Wuzi chopped out with his hand, causing him to fall to the ground. When they looked around the hall, they saw a woman with a red helmet and armor staring at them with her eyes wide open. Without saying anything, a wave of spiritual energy shot over and caused her to fall to the ground. Everything happened in 3 breaths' time. At this time, 7th Duanjin had just entered the hall. Kun Wuzi threw the 2 of them to one side. "Go and find that red lady." Li Shan naturally didn't need his order. He went to the back door of the hall to look for her. After another quarter of an hour, he also brought Red Lady over. The man and the 2 demons on Mount June were all captured in less than an hour. This matter was exceptionally smooth. It was so smooth that Kun Wuzi felt it was a little strange. But when he looked at that Lu Laodao, although his meridians were sealed by spiritual energy, and he couldn't move, he could still speak. This Laodao glared at Li Shan. After staring for a while, he gnashed his teeth and said, "You thief! Why did the restrictions on my Mount Dao lose their effectiveness? So it was you, thief." Kuan Wuzi frowned slightly as he sized up these three people. Laodao appeared to be filled with righteous indignation, but the three flowers didn't say anything. His eyes turned around, as if he was thinking about how to escape. At this moment, the calmest one was Red Lady. She was thrown on the ground, leaning against a table in the hall. She narrowed her eyes and looked at Kuan Wuzi, then at Li Shan. She said, "Do you know what you are doing?" Li Shan ignored her, and carefully checked the hall with 7th Duanjin, to see if there were any clues or arrays left by Li Yunxin. The two of them cooperated very well, as if it had become a habit. Kuan Wuzi smiled. "Of course I know. You are the Princess of Dongting, the daughter of Lord Dongting." He pondered for a while and said, "We came here for these two people. The princess suffered an unexpected disaster, but Li Yunxin escaped. Does the princess know where he went?" Red Lady seemed to think for a while, and looked at Lu Laodao again. Then she blinked. "Who are you?" Chapter 270. I am Kuan Wuzi. He thought for a while and added, "Daodong's Langya Cave's High Master Kuan Wuzi." Red Madam raised her eyebrows. "I've never heard of him." Kuan Wuzi laughed. "Princess, you don't have to be emotional. I know you like Li Yunxin, but I'm afraid you have to give him up now. Do you know how is Li Yunxin now?" As he spoke, he looked at Lu Laodao's reaction. Red Madam did not speak. He smiled and said in a deep voice, "Li Yunxin went to Pitfall Mountain. You and I both know about this. But what you don't know is that hatred also went there. And he killed Li Yunxin." As he said this, he saw the three captives looked at each other. Lu Laodao sneered. Kuan Wuzi laughed again. "Why? You don't believe me?" Laodao raised his head and stared at him. "So what?" Kuan Wuzi walked in front of him and looked down at him. "I know that the one who died was his incarnation. But I also know that his deity level is not in Dongting now. Now the Taoist priests of my cave are looking for him. The demon incarnation of the truth state was killed, and his cultivation base was greatly damaged. But there are still 4 Taoist priests of the truth state under I. Do you think he can escape?" As he said this, he finally saw Lu Laodao's face showed a trace of loosening. He was angry earlier. When he heard Kuan Wuzi say Li Yunxin was killed, he sneered with disdain. Now he finally showed a fleeting panic. But he quickly concealed it and said, "You know? So what if you know? My Dragon King killed your Daodong's Ling Kongzi when he was still a young man. He also killed your Dean of Law Yunzi in the place of Outer Fringe. Do you, a Taoist priest, know what his plan is? How is his plan? You know that you are standing in the middle hall now. Hee, isn't it his intention?" Kuan Wuzi was slightly stunned and subconsciously looked around. But it was very quiet in the hall. Qi Duanjin and Li Shan had begun to set up a restriction in the middle hall. Sunlight from the end of summer seeped in through the broken door of the hall. Tiny dust particles danced in the sunlight. He watched warily for a while before he breathed a sigh of relief and felt a little more at ease. Because what Lu Laodao had said before was exactly what he was worried about. But now that he had said it himself, it meant that this worry no longer existed. He sneered coldly. "But I..." Just as he said that, he heard Taoist Lu shout, "Did you hear that? Go tell your young miss." This shout caused Kuan Wuzi to be slightly stunned, and he suspected that it was a diversionary tactic. But soon after, a figure suddenly shot out from the west side of the hall and fled into the distance, disappearing in the blink of an eye. Kuan Wuzi and Li Shan looked at each other. But the Taoist immediately said, "Don't chase after them. Yes, Bai Yunxin is still in Dongting." He smiled. "I'll get rid of her sooner or later. She is just in the real realm." If she was smart, she would have escaped from Dongting after getting the message. If she had to come, she would have stayed. I'm in the mysterious realm. Why should I be afraid of her? Li Shan ignored him and continued to set up his restriction. Lu Laodao raised his head and stared at him, saying angrily, "Mysterious realm? Humph! Which one of the people Brother Xan killed was worse than him?" Kuan Wuzi smiled tolerantly, as if he didn't want to argue with an ignorant child. You are just a nobody. You don't know what the mysterious realm means. After saying that, he looked around. The hall of the middle hall was made of ancient materials. There were only a few tables and no chairs. But there was a wrought-tan chair with a golden round screen beside him. It was the chair that Lu Laodao treasured and liked to sit on these days. Seeing that he was looking at it, Laodao shouted angrily again. Move your eyes away. Do you think my throne is something you can look at? Pooh. Headmaster, you are just a kid who doesn't even dare to fight openly. At first, Kuan Wuzi was in a good mood, because he got what he wanted. At the same time, he was worried that it was a trap, and didn't want to argue with him. Now that he had made up his mind, he didn't like the way Lin Luoran talked. Even when he was Fayunzi of the Langi Cave abode, he was also the favorite disciple of head Kuan Wuzi. No one dared to talk to him like this. Therefore, he sneered and walked to the chair. He watched Lu Laodao sit on it. Then he patted the armrest gently. I am treating you with courtesy. But if you don't know how to appreciate my kindness, let alone this chair, even your personal ability and life won't be yours in the future. The righteous path in the world is in Daotong and Kenzo. You are also a human, a cultivator. Now he was in cahoots with the demons, helping the evildoers. How could he have a good end? But if you know what's good for you, maybe in the future, I will only destroy your personal ability and spare your life. Now listen carefully. I want to ask you, where is Ling Kongzi now? Lu Laodao's beard and hair stood up, and he laughed. Daotong and Kenzo? You bastards of the Freemasonry, don't speak a word of truth. You call yourself Kuan Wuzi? Bah! I think you are a ghost who has taken over a body. Kuan Wuzi suddenly sat up straight, and looked at Li Shan and Kedwanjin. This Laodao knows about the Freemasonry. Then Li Yunxin also told him about this. His face suddenly darkened, and he widened his eyes. What else do you know? You have spies all over the world with ulterior motives. Lu Laodao stared at him. He seemed to have decided that he wouldn't leave the middle hall of the Emperor Star Palace alive. And he told them everything. Although I don't know what you want, things will be exposed one day. For example, the three of you are ghosts of the Freemasonry, right? Ghosts take over a body, and then do some shady things. Do you think we don't know there are other people around Dongting besides the three of you? Brother Xian went to the Pitting Mountain to find the parasite there. You said he was killed. Hee. How do you know he didn't do it on purpose to draw others out? If you are smart, go out of Dongting now to save your fellows. If you are late, Humph, you will be killed by him. Kuan Wuzi glanced at Kedwanjin. Kedwanjin thought for a while, shook his head, and said in a low voice, he lied. Li Yunxin didn't know it before. I met him outside the Pitting Mountain cave, and then fought with Evil King. If he knew I was in the Pitting Mountain, he wouldn't show his original face. Kuan Wuzi nodded. He squinted again, staring at Lu Laodao for a while, and smiled. It seems that you don't know much about it. Did Li Yunxin teach you these? Delaying tactic? Laodao glared at him. You can be arrogant here. It's not a loss for me to exchange my old and weak body for you guys. Brother Xian might have already killed a few of them by now. One is not a loss too. I Laodao have earned a life. Kuan Wuzi laughed. You old idiot. Do you know that there are only the three of us near Dongting? Where can your brother Xian go to kill? However, your flustered and exasperated look is quite funny. Let me guess. You are fearless in the face of death. Are you thinking that there are still people outside Dongting? Lu Laodao was slightly stunned, but he soon covered up the anger on his face and just stared at Kuan Wuzi. You think you are smart? Kuan Wuzi twirled his beard and smiled again. His eyes were full of sarcasm. I know you still have people outside Dongting. A rat monster, a rabbit monster, and a ghost. They were saved in front of I. What can 3 emptiness realms do? Dozens of cultivators under my command are also trying to catch them. Now they should be caught. Lu Laodao didn't say anything. He lowered his head and stayed silent for a while, as if he was discouraged. But when Kuan Wuzi planned to take advantage of the victory and pry open his heart, he suddenly realized that Kuan Wuzi was whispering. Kuan Wuzi frowned. What are you talking about? Lu Laodao raised his head and looked at him. What are your real names? The old man's face was a little weird. Kuan Wuzi looked at him in confusion. Why do you ask this? You already know enough. Now answer this lord's question. Where is Ling Kongzi? But Lu Laodao turned a deaf ear to him and continued to say, Brother Xane killed one of your people. He called himself Qing Liangzi. Then, are there also Hai Liangzi, Li Liangzi, Pai Liangzi, and Peng Liangzi? Laodao smiled coldly. They are all your people, right? Kuan Wuzi was stunned. Li Shan and Kidwanjin also stopped what they were doing and turned to look at Lu Laodao. They heard Laodao continued to sneer. So do I know enough? Kuan Wuzi was silent for a while and turned to look at Li Shan. You are right. That Li Yunqin really knows a lot of inside information. We should really catch him alive and ask him. Then he turned to look at Lu Laodao and smiled calmly. You really deserve to die. But even if you die, it can be considered as a worthy death. Among the mortals and low-realm cultivators in this world, it is indeed rare to see someone like you who knows so many secrets. Sigh. I am talking to you calmly, but you are so stubborn. Do you want to be like her? Kuan Wuzi sighed softly and raised his hand. Suddenly, a mysterious light that was like a spider's web shot out from his finger. In the blink of an eye, it drilled into Red Lady's eyes. The scene that followed became somewhat terrifying. Those lights were actually tangible. They were like countless long worms wriggling under Red Lady's skin and flesh. They first invaded her face and then moved downwards. Then they went to her neck, chest, and finally into her clothes. Everywhere they passed, the skin and flesh seemed to have been plowed, becoming soft and loose. It was as if she had aged several decades in an instant and turned into an old woman with sagging skin. This scene was already terrifying, so the pain that the person being tortured felt should be even more terrifying. Kuan Wuzi narrowed his eyes and looked at Lu Laodao as he said slowly. First, it drilled under your skin, burrowing into your flesh again. When it reaches your flesh, it plows through and runs into your bones. But my mystic light is spiritual energy. Although you will suffer, it will also nourish your body. That was why he could make you feel so much pain on one side, but not kill you on the other. Just keep an eye on her. After that, he just stared at Lu Laodao fiercely, waiting for him to feel the pain that Red Lady was about to let out. However, after a quarter of an hour, there was no sound at all. Kuan Wuzi was stunned and turned to look at Red Lady. The Princess of Dongting looks at him calmly. My father's means. He's much smarter than you. This level. Are you playing around? Kuan Wuzi was dumbfounded. Lu Laodao laughed out loud and looked at him from the corner of his eyes. Which one of us is afraid of death? Kuan Wuzi immediately fell silent. Then, with a wave of his hand, he withdrew the mysterious light from Red Lady's body. I see. Since you're not afraid of death, I won't let you die for now. I want you to watch them die. As soon as he finished speaking, he waved his hand again. A blade-like spiritual energy was spat out with a buzz. The next moment, blood shot up to the sky. With a thud, Sanhua's head fell to the ground. After a long time, Lu Laodao turned his head and stared at Sanhua's headless body slowly leaning on him. The blood that flowed out from the broken neck quickly soaked half of his body. It was indeed warm blood, not an illusion. Kuan Wuzi observed him in silence. Then he smiled at Li Shan. It seems that this Li Yunqin is really not here. Or, he doesn't care about these people as much as we think. He still doesn't show up now. Do you think it's the former or the latter? Li Shan and the snake spirit finally finished setting up the restriction in the hall. They walked over and stared at old Taoist Lu for a while before saying, looking at this old thing's appearance, he isn't faking it. As he spoke, he casually grabbed something in the void, as if he had caught something. But you only destroyed the demon's body, and the ghost is still there. I should have destroyed the Yin soul as well to avoid trouble. He frowned and turned to look at his hand. What method did this demon cultivate? I can't crush the ghost? Chapter 271. Kuan Wuzi turns his head and glances at him. After all, you cultivate the demon's path and advance to the real state with the power of wish. It's normal for you to meet a demon who cultivates the heterodox path before your realm is stabilized. As he says this, he casually grabs the ghost from Li Shan's hand. Keep it for now. I'm still making a furnace of Huangya bolus on Mount Yunshan. It's good to use it to open the bolus. Old thing, do you understand now? Kuan Wuzi smiles at Lu Laodao. Don't underestimate my determination to kill. Lu Laodao's anger seems to be overflowing. He looks at Kuan Wuzi and suddenly closes his eyes. Then kill me too. Brother Xian will let you die 100 times more miserably. Kuan Wuzi sneers, okay. I'll fulfill your wish. As he says this, he suddenly waves his hand. With a swish, his spiritual power shoots at Lu Laodao's ear like a sword. However, it doesn't penetrate his head, and only scratches his ear. He actually didn't die. However, Lu Laodao doesn't open his eyes, and doesn't look like he just survived a disaster. Instead, he grits his teeth and says, "What? You don't dare to kill me?" Kuan Wuzi ignores him. He looks at Li Shan and finally lets out a long sigh. Li Yunxin really doesn't seem to be in Dongting. That's good. Kuan Wuzi is really relieved. He reaches out his hand and rubs his forehead, then says, then immediately. But halfway through his words, a talisman in his sleeve suddenly vibrates crazily. This is a purple talisman. Yunzi used this talisman to talk to Kuan Wuzi before the battle with Li Yunxin in the city of Wei. Now Kuan Wuzi also hides a few in his sleeve. He knows that this is a message from the Taoist priest stationed in the city of Wei. Also, this message must be very urgent, otherwise, who would be willing to use this thing? He immediately frowns and takes out the talisman and burns it. Then, a swaying figure appears in the void. This figure opens his mouth and says, "Headmaster Li Yunxin is here." The three raiders in the hall looked at each other. Kuan Wuzi said seriously, "Is it really Li Yunxin? In City of Wei? Tell me in detail, don't rush." The shadow was a Daotong cultivator. His tone seemed to be slightly frightened. He just arrived, and he's still cursing outside the city. Before he left, he instructed us not to act rashly if we see Li Yunxin, and to call for reinforcements. We did the same thing, but at that time, our three shitty were patrolling the spell formation outside the restriction, so the demon got nothing and captured them all. When I received the news from within the city, I brought some people over to take a look. It was indeed the person the Holy See had spoken of. Right now, Kuan Wuzi interrupted him. "What do you think about Li Yunxin?" Who paused for a moment then said, "He was very arrogant, only cursing outside, telling us to go out and die." "Then why aren't you going?" The cultivator was stunned. "Sect Master. He's using the lives of his 3 junior martial brothers to threaten us. Although I'm in the true state, I can't protect my 3 junior martial brothers and capture him at the same time. I've already sent a message to the senior martial brothers who are out. Wait for them to come back. And the 3 of us in the true state." Kuan Wuzi slapped the armrest of the rattan chair and shouted, "Stupid! He is a demon. Do you think your 3 junior martial brothers can survive if they fall into his hands? That Li Yunxin has already lost one of his doppelgangers, and he is very weak now. He's bluffing. Go out and catch him immediately. If you wait any longer, he will escape." The cultivator still wanted to say something, but Kuan Wuzi shouted again, "Go now." This time, the cultivator didn't dare to hesitate anymore. The shadow shook for a while, and then disappeared immediately. Kuan Wuzi stared at the void for a while, and then waved his hand angrily. "Stupid! Bastard! You ruined my plan." Li Shan thought for a while and sighed lightly. "It's good. At least we know that he is really outside Dongting now. But if he goes to catch Li Yunxin now, he will return in vain. In my opinion, he wants to use the 3 Taoist priests to threaten you. But he is afraid that people in the city will chase after him. So he is bluffing outside the city. Once he goes out, he will probably turn around and leave. No matter how weak he is still a cultivator in the true state. How can we catch him?" Kuan Wuzi snorted angrily. "Threaten me? Use the people of Daotong to threaten me?" Li Shan looked at him. "Don't forget that you are Kuan Wuzi, the head of the Langye Cave Paradise. Those Taoists are all your disciples. As Kuan Wuzi, you can't ignore their lives. He must have this idea. But he doesn't know that we are already in Dongting now." Kuan Wuzi thought for a while and said reluctantly, "It makes sense. Alas, let's wait." They didn't have to wait long. 15 minutes later, The cultivator used a purple amulet to send a message. As Li Shan expected, once they went out of the city, Li Yunqin immediately slipped away with the 3 Taoists. So, he should come back. Li Shan thought for a while. As he spoke, he walked around the 2 captives who were still alive. Then he stopped in front of them. But how will he come back? Then he turned to look at Kuan Wuzi. For example, Li Yunqin opened the back door of his summer palace outside Dongting. So if he wants to borrow the summer palace from outside Dongting, he can't bring the summer palace with him. So, he must still be in Dongting. So where is he? Kuan Wuzi looked at him and suddenly laughed. That's right. Where is he? Old thing, tell me. Lu Laodao closed his mouth and didn't say anything. Kuan Wuzi stood up slowly from the rattan chair. Then he walked around the rattan chair, stopped behind it, and patted the back of the chair with his hands. Let me guess. He looked at Lu Laodao. You 3 were staying in this Ziwei palace, but you were suddenly captured by us. You should be angry and anxious. But right now you're angry and anxious. Since you were still thinking about your chair and told me not to touch it. He leaned forward slightly. Were you thinking that the more you told me not to touch it, the more I wanted to touch it, and even wanted to sit on it? Li Shan looked at Lu Laodao expressionlessly. So after you sat on it, this old thing became more and more arrogant. He was simply fearless. School fellow apprentice. If you want me to guess where Li Yunqin's summer palace is, I think it is here. Lu Laodao finally opened his eyes and tightly pursed his lips. His beard was trembling slightly, and he stared at Li Shan. Li Shan also looked at him. While looking at him, he reached out to feel the rattan chair. As mentioned before, this rattan chair was not an ordinary thing. How could there be ordinary things in the Ziwei Palace of Lord Dongting? Therefore this rattan was actually very hard. It couldn't be destroyed by axes or fire. The rattan on the cushion of the chair was thick as 2 fingers. When one sat on it, it was soft but not deep, and extremely comfortable. Li Shan looked at Lu Laodao and used his fingernails to cut open the cushion of the rattan chair. He made a 2-finger-long opening, put his hand in, and started laughing. Then he took out a folding fan from the interlayer of the cushion. Waving it in front of Lu Laodao, he said, Is it this? Lu Laodao sighed and closed his eyes. His body also became weary. Kuan Wuzi took the folding fan, opened it, and looked at it carefully. It was a white paper fan, and on the fan was a picture of mountains and rivers. Looking at this picture, it seemed to be the surrounding terrain of the city of Wei. He carefully transferred some spiritual power to it, and then let out a breath. I got a treasure for free. Li Shan asked, really? Kuan Wuzi thought for a while. Kuan Wuzi once told me that Li Yunqin gathered the power of millions of souls in the city of Wei to make a lingtu. He put the mountains and rivers near the city of Wei into the picture, and even sealed Yunzi's soul into the picture. This is indeed a lingtu. It's on his folding fan. A Taoist priest of the true state can't make a lingtu. This thing can't be fake. That's where his temporary imperial residence is. He smiled, asking me to sit on it. That Li Yun will have something on his mind, so he can ambush me. Unfortunately, you guys are 1 step behind. We're not like those idiots in Daotong. Cut off all emotions and abandon all desires. Abandon your brain too. He took a few more steps and walked back to the rattan chair. He looked at Lu Laodao and sat comfortably on it. He laughed coldly. This kind of low-level trick can't even be considered elegant. That Kuan Wuzi told me not to underestimate him. As he spoke, he turned his head and smiled at Li Shan. That's all. Li Shan smiled. Then let's wait for him to come. Wait for that Bai Yunqin to come too. Just like that, they waited for about an hour. Kuan Wuzi kept fiddling with the folding fan that Li Yunqin's lingtu had turned into, looking at it over and over again. He seemed to like it very much. Then Bai Yunqin came. The adopted daughter of the Golden Rock King descended from the sky and stood in front of the door of the hall, looking around coldly. She then raised her voice. Why are the 3 of you stopping me from doing something? Kuan Wuzi ignored her for a while, then stood up and slowly walked to the door of the hall with his hands behind his back, standing in the sunlight. He carefully looked at Bai Yunqin, then smiled. This is the first time I've seen the adopted daughter of the Golden Rock King. Hearing about her is not as good as meeting her in person. I only know that she's a stunning beauty when I see her. But it's a pity that she's a demon. So what do you want to do? Bai Yunxin frowned, because of his frivolous words. However, she subconsciously looked into the hall, and didn't take another step forward. I'm here on the orders of the Golden Rock King to retrieve the dragon soul, and stay on Mount June. Since you guys are here to cause trouble, this is also my business. Kuan Wuzi was silent for a while, then suddenly burst into laughter. As he laughed, he turned to Li Shan and said, "See, I'm the one who sees things clearly. I said that this Bai Yunxin is a demon, and an arrogant one at that. I bet that she wouldn't just run away on her own, and would come back to settle the score with us. Now I'm right. It's better to keep a low profile. For the past 1,000 years, this demon has run amok in the world. Everyone knows her temper. Since we know her temper, we have a way to deal with her." Then he turned to look at Bai Yunxin. "Listen carefully. Your adopted father, the Golden Rock King, has an agreement with Dao Tong. If Dao Tong doesn't offend him, he won't offend Dao Tong. This time, we're going to war with the demons, but the Golden Rock King won't touch them. Since you're the adopted daughter of the Golden Rock King, I advise you not to get involved in this mess. Go back and tell the Golden Rock King that I've taken the dragon soul. If he has any objections, he can go to Mount Yun and tell the two sages." Chapter 272. Bai Yunxin shows hesitation on her face. Then she looks at the hall again. Kuan Wuzi sneers. "I think you can see it. I have set inhibition in this hall. It's hard for you to break in with the cultivation of the realm of truth. If I were you, I would either listen to my advice and leave Dongting to avoid the disaster, or don't give up. Then you should go out of Dongting and tell Li Yunxin that we are waiting for him in the lake. His people are all in my hands. That's all I have to say. Take care of yourself." After saying this, he flings his sleeve and goes back to the hall. Bai Yunxin has never been insulted like this. She is furious at once. However, just as Kuan Wuzi had said, the restrictive spell that they had set up wasn't something that she could break in a short period of time. She tried to break it a few times, but the middle hall didn't even shake. Instead, she almost got devoured by the power of the restrictive spell. After struggling for a quarter of an hour, she finally runs away with anger. Seeing that she disappears in the sky, Kuan Wuzi breathes a sigh of relief and opens the folding fan in his hand again. Li Shan is stunned and asks him, "You really let her go like this? If she really goes out of Dongting and finds Li Yunxin?" Kuan Wuzi smiles and shows him the folding fan in his hand. "As I said, we got a treasure for nothing. Take a look." Li Shan's eyes fall on the fan. At first glance, it is just an ordinary picture of mountains and rivers. But after looking at it for a while, he finds the subtlety of it. Something is moving. "This is a lingtu. It is the first time for me to see it." Kuan Wuzi stretches out a finger and points on the picture. On a figure as thin as dust. "Who do you think it looks like?" The real eel monster Li Shan is blind and can't see anything. But Li Shan, who is transformed by Tan Liangzhu, is not blind. He gets closer and looks at it attentively for a while. He exclaims in a low voice, "Li Yunxin?" "It's him." Kuan Wuzi sneers. "This is his summer palace, so this thing may have something to do with him. I can actually see him on it." It was said that spirit paintings were meant to absorb the spirits of all living things into their scrolls. If one understood the method and changed the things in the painting, then the things that actually existed would also change. However, it had always been rumored that it was the work of the art saint. No one knew how to do it. But now, it seemed like it was true. When this Li Yunxin moves outside, we can see it clearly from this spirit map. According to this window, look, he's going into the wildwood. They were probably going to find the entrance to the temporary imperial residence. They were coming. We know his whereabouts like the back of our hands. We don't have to worry about him not being caught. After he said that, Lu Laodao's face turned even paler, like a piece of white paper. "So, why did I ask that Bai Yunxin to leave?" Kuan Wuzi laughed. The agreement between the Golden Rock King and Dao Tong was their business. I had already instructed those Taoist priests to kill any demons they see, leaving none alive. Those Taoist priests killed by Yunxin, and the Golden Rock King was furious. Now the battle between the Daotong Kenzo and the demons will be even more exciting. Isn't this what we want? When he said this, he saw that the figure of Li Yunxin on the fan had stopped somewhere. He immediately threw the fan into the hall and said in a deep voice, "We'll talk after we finish the task. He's coming. Activate the array." Li Shan immediately understood. He and 7th Duanjin moved to the side and pointed a few times in the air. The array formation that they had set up in the middle hall of the Emperor Star Palace was immediately activated. A stretch of mystic light converged from the walls of the hall and enveloped the folding fan. There were countless tiny dust particles dancing in the mysterious light. But if one looked carefully, they would find that they weren't dust particles, but millions of true talisman incantations. This was a magic treasure that Kuan Wuzi had passed down to him. Once it was set up properly, even a cultivator at the peak of the true state would lose a layer of skin if he accidentally entered the array. But that sect leader would never have thought that. It was being used by someone who had disguised as him. An astonishing amount of spiritual power began to circulate in the hall, and every trace of air gradually had spots of light. The hall seemed to be filled with something else. Lu Laodao, who had the lowest cultivation, even began to feel that it was hard to breathe, as if he was inhaling a sticky liquid. The mystic light shrouding the folding fan became more and more intense. In the end, it turned into a small sun, illuminating the gloomy hall. It was as if the inside of the hall was daytime, while the outside of the hall was nighttime. Kuan Wuzi's sleeves fluttered, and blue veins appeared on his forehead. He felt that the powerful force brought by the array formation was filling his body. He had become the eye of the array, and all the spiritual power in the surroundings was channeled into his strong body. And through his control, it was poured into a true talisman incantation in the mysterious light. This was his strongest moment, but it was also his weakest moment. Right now, he was like an iron bucket filled with black powder, and with just a little spark, he would pour all the terrifying and violent power onto Li Yunxin, who was coming out of the fan. Finally he shouted, "When he shows himself." But at this moment an accident happened. It was as if a surging river was suddenly cut off from the middle, a high-speed machine suddenly lost its power, a kite high in the sky suddenly had its string cut off. The flow of spiritual power in the array was cut off in an instant. It was as if something had opened its huge mouth and swallowed all the spiritual power in the vicinity of Mount June in an instant. But it wasn't just spiritual power. Kuan Wuzi was now using himself as the eye of the array to control the spiritual power. He was a node. This node absorbed the spiritual power of heaven and earth to supply the crazily revolving array. But right now, the spiritual power that was pouring into his body suddenly disappeared. But the array didn't stop immediately, even though it was only for a short moment. But how could the spiritual power consumed by a magic treasure that could trap a cultivator at the peak of the true realm be comparable to that of an ordinary person? At this moment Kuan Wuzi's body was almost sucked dry, but cultivators used their own bodies as cauldrons, absorbing the spiritual power of heaven and earth to temper their bodies. Their flesh and skin would produce endless spiritual power. Although it was temporarily sucked dry, he would recover very quickly after resting for a quarter of an hour. But he didn't get this chance. In that instant, he realized that the situation had changed, and he immediately shouted, wanting to put away the magic treasure for the time being. But at this moment, he suddenly realized that Li Shan and Qi Duanjin, who were opposite him, suddenly revealed an extremely shocked expression. The two of them opened their mouths. Time seemed to become extremely slow at this moment. Kuan Wuzi could almost see their throats trembling, their eyelashes slightly trembling, and their pupils dilating, wanting to shout out a warning to him. How fast was the reaction of a high-level cultivator like him? Before they could make a sound, they immediately looked at the fan. Then, there was only enough time for a thought to appear in their minds. There wasn't anything strange? The next moment his body, which was temporarily drained of spiritual power, was sent flying with a boom. The true realm dragon's attack from behind had landed solidly on his body. Even though his body was as strong as a profound realm cultivator, without the protection of the spiritual power circulating in his body, he couldn't withstand such a violent and fierce attack. When he was flying in the air, he spat out a mouthful of blood. This wasn't a body that was perfectly fused with a living person. The wandering soul that had possessed his body was actually shaken by this attack, and it was about to leave his body. He was sent flying, and because of this, he finally saw the person who had sneak attacked him. It was Li Yunqin. Li Yunqin had already revealed his fiend god body. His eyes were wide open, and they almost split open. He hadn't retracted his fists, and the surface of his fists were covered with dark green scales. And these scales, which belonged to a true realm great demon of the dragon clan, who was known for his powerful body, had already shattered and golden dragon blood seeped out. From this, it could be seen just what kind of terrifying and violent strength he had exerted in that strike just now. Kuan Wuzi, who was flying in the air, only had one thought in his mind. His palace is still under the restriction he set up. Where did he come from? This shameless demon. Wait for me to take this. But there wasn't even the word take this. After Li Yunqin sent him flying, he immediately loosened his fists and grabbed the air, and a green iron chain appeared in his hand. Then, he shook his wrist again, and the iron chain suddenly expanded, wrapping around the wandering soul that had possessed it, and pulling him out of his body. At this moment, Li Shan and Qi Jin finally reacted, and they shouted as they tried to snatch Li Yunqin's iron chain. But Li Yunqin didn't panic. His right hand used the iron chain to bind the wandering soul, and his left hand drew a few strokes in the air at a speed so fast that it couldn't be seen clearly. The entire hall immediately let out a buzzing sound. The restriction they had set up in the hall earlier exploded with a dazzling golden light, and then a terrible feeling of sluggishness and helplessness descended. The two demons suddenly stopped in the air, and then they realized that the spiritual energy in their bodies was depleting at a frightening speed. The scene where they sucked Fu Liangliang dry just now appeared again. This demon Li Yunqin laughed coldly and shouted, "Scram!" With a kick, he sent the two demons flying back, and they rolled on the ground 3 times before they could barely stop their bodies. When they got up again with their incomparably heavy bodies, they saw that Fu Liangliang was tightly bound by the iron chain in Li Yunqin's hand, and he couldn't move at all. And at this time, Li Yunqin returned to his human form with a thick fog. He first kicked Fu Liangliang's wandering soul to the ground, then turned around and plucked the round jade screen embedded in the back of the rattan chair. Then, with a wave of his hand, an identical jade screen appeared in his palm. The 2 jade screens were immediately absorbed into one spot, turning into a round, shining moon halo. Profound light treasure mirror? Fu Liangliang, who was lying on the ground, cried out in disbelief. Li Yunqin ignored him. He first walked over to pick up the headless body of Triflower and looked at it, then put it down. Then, he patted Lu Laodao and Red Lady's bodies, unlocking the spiritual energy in their bodies. He first asked, "How many of them are outside?" Lu Laodao took a few deep breaths, and stood up with the help of Li Yunqin's hand. They said just now, there are only these 3, no more. Okay. Li Yunqin then helped Red Lady up, and then turned to look at Fu Liangliang. After looking for a while, he sighed. Old Lu clearly said, "It was me who set up this trap to lure you out. Why don't you believe me?" Chapter 273. Fu Liangzi was dumbfounded. 3 breaths ago, he was still confident of his victory. 3 breaths later, he was tied to the ground and even lost his body. How could this be? But Li Yunqin did not care about what he was thinking at this moment. Instead, he walked to the body of Kuan Wuzi and reached out to search it. After searching for a while, he took out something and threw it into the void. That thing immediately cried out, "Ah! Damn it! My body! Kill! Li Yunqin sighed with heartache. It took a lot of effort to create such a body. You are really ruthless. As he spoke, he walked to Fu Liangzi's side and gave him a few more kicks. Not on his body, but on his face. It was clear that his heart was completely black. Logically speaking, One would not be able to touch such a wandering soul without using spiritual energy. But how could the thing Li Yunxin used to tie him up be an ordinary thing? When Bai Yanjun appointed him as a Yang realm judge, he gave him the soul-hooking iron chain. It was used to capture ghosts. Once tied up by this thing, there was nowhere to hide. Even a ghost would have to show itself. Now that she had shown herself, Li Yunxin wasn't just stepping on his face, she was stepping on his soul. How could Fu Liangzi endure this kind of terrible pain? The shocked thoughts in his mind immediately flew to the sky, and he screamed in pain, looking extremely pitiful. This Li Yunxin stepped on him a few times to vent his anger and shouted, "What are you screaming for? You still have hard times ahead of you, behave yourself." He turned around and scolded Li Shan and Qi Jin, who were not far away. This Li Shan was already in the true state, so he should not be much weaker than Li Yunxin, whose clone was killed. But they really did not have any strength left. They didn't know where this terrifying restriction came from. But it immediately sucked away every bit of spiritual power within their bodies, and they couldn't accumulate even the slightest bit. Just now, they tried to rush out while Li Yunxin was distracted, but after hearing his shout, they immediately stopped moving. Li Yunxin narrowed his eyes, stared at the two of them and sneered. "I know what you are. I also know that you can abandon your bodies and run, but I advise you not to do anything stupid. In my array, once your wandering souls leave you, hee. He didn't say the result, but his final sneer was enough to stun the two of them and dispel the thought of being seen through by him. Only then did Li Yunxin sit on the backless rattan chair and sigh. He stared at Fu Liangzi and nodded. "Fu Liangzi." He then looked at Li Shan. "Tan Liangzi." Finally, he looked at Qi Jin and frowned. "I thought there would be more hidden in the Su family. I didn't know you were hiding in the Pitfall Mountain. What's your serial number? What's your Taoist name?" This seventh Duan Jin rarely spoke. At this moment, he was just like a follower. However, when Li Yunxin asked her, she hesitated for a moment before answering honestly, "Yang Quantum." "Ha." Li Yunxin sighed. No one knew what he was sighing about. He was silent for a moment, then bent down to pick up his folding fan and put it in his sleeve. He turned to look at Fu Liangzi. "Say it. Where's your base? How many people are there in Daodong? I remember there's also Lin Liangzi. Where did he go?" Fu Liangzi glared at him. Obviously, he wasn't willing to accept his failure. No one would be willing to accept this. He still didn't know how things turned out this way. He stared at Li Yunxin for a while, then said in a deep voice, "That folding fan is clearly your temporary imperial residence. How did you run out of this treasure mirror of mystic light?" Lu Laodao had originally found a table to sit and catch his breath. Hearing his question, he and Li Yunxin looked at each other. Then, a strange smile appeared on their faces. Fu Liangzi was so angry that he was about to explode. Looking at this mysterious smile, he felt even more that he had been fooled. He was fooled after his failure. This was something that he should be doing. So he gritted his teeth and said, "What are you laughing at?" Li Yunxin kicked him with the tip of his foot. Fu Liangzi grimaced in pain. "I'm laughing at how cute you are. Old Lu knows that I like to talk. For example, just now when you three idiots were full of confidence, I slapped you in the face. What should I do after slapping your face?" Fu Liangzi frowned. He didn't know what was hidden in Li Yunxin's words. Therefore, he didn't dare to say another word. He was afraid that this guy, who was so cunning, would hear some secrets. Old Taoist Lu laughed mockingly. "I'm reminiscing." Li Yunxin laughed and clapped his hands. He pointed at Fu Liangzi and said, "That's why I like idiots like you who still ask questions after being stepped on. If you don't ask, how can I be proud of myself?" Fu Liangzi opened his mouth in shock. He didn't know what to say. Li Yunxin looked at him condescendingly with drooping eyelids. "You do recognize this mysterious light treasure mirror. You know that this is the magic treasure of that bastard Yu Yunzi in your Langya cave abode, right? After he hung up, I took this thing. What is this called again? To put it in a literary way, it's called killing and robbing. But magic treasures are considered personal secrets. I think that when Yunzi was alive, he wouldn't tell anyone about the use of this thing. But you don't know, but I do." He looked at Lu Laodao. "Old Lu, do you remember? Back then, when we were living in the Yu family's villa, Yu Yunzi came to talk to me. His doppelganger came out of this thing. Lu Laodao stroked his beard and nodded. Yes. At that time, this thing was hanging on the acacia tree. It looked like a moon. Li Yunxin let out a sigh. Actually, this thing can be divided into 2 pieces. It's like a portal. I left one piece on the back of the chair, and I took the other one with me. So do you understand? The one in the Pitfall Mountain was my doppelganger. My real body was within 30 miles of the Pitfall Mountain. After I finished my business, I walked in from one piece and came out from the other. You guys just had to stare at my dragon palace. Who else would die if not you? Lu Laodao laughed. Laodao, I'm good at acting. These 2 people were so proud of themselves. Fu Liangzi and the other 2 people hated them to the core. But there was nothing they could do. He gritted his teeth and frowned. How did you know this? Wait a minute. He looked up at Li Yunxin. How did you know who we are? And how did you know how to break my prohibition? It was fine if he didn't say it. Hearing this, Li Yunxin suddenly remembered something. He clapped his hands. Oh, I almost forgot about this. As he spoke, he got up and walked around the spacious hall. While walking, he reached out his hand to grab something in the air. Seeing this, Fu Liangzi's face turned pale. His expression was even worse than Lu Laodao's. When Li Yunxin came back, she rubbed and squeezed the things in her hands. Then she said hoarsely, How did you know about this? But Li Yunxin concentrated on kneading the air in his hand. After kneading it for a while, he sighed and took out the folding fan from his sleeve. He put it next to his ear and asked, How did I get this thing? There seemed to be a reply from the fan. He smiled. I got it. Then he stared at the empty palm for a long time. Pointing with his fingers, he said, Cloud, come. As soon as he said so, a small cloud gathered in his palm. It looked like an auspicious cloud. This white, soft, and cute little thing floated in his palm. It trembled slightly due to the movement of the air. It was as if the cloud in the sky had shrunk by 1,000 times and was now controlled by someone. Fu Liangzi's face was ashen, but Li Yunxin looked like he had obtained a precious toy. Then, he took out the mysterious light treasure mirror from his sleeve. He muttered something, as if he was repeating some unfamiliar steps. At the same time, he pointed at the treasure mirror. Then, he threw the 2 into the air. Go! The mysterious light treasure mirror and the white cloud immediately fused together. Beside the golden halo of the moon was a floating cloud, quietly floating in the hall. The soft light it emitted filled every corner of the room. It was as if it was the Mid-Autumn Festival. Colorful clouds accompanied the moon. Fu Liangzi was dumbfounded for the umpteenth time. Li Yunxin became even more arrogant after getting a bargain. He said proudly, Kuan Wuzi and Yunzi are the most important. So, he took this treasure apart. The moon wheel became the mysterious light treasure mirror, and was passed to Yunzi. The colorful cloud became the mysterious light fog, and was passed to you. Unfortunately, the 2 of you are not up to expectations. In the end, I got it. Now let me tell you. This thing combined into one is called Fog Lock Toad Palace. It is the top treasure of your Langia heavenly grotto. It was personally made by the book saint. He paused for a while and looked at Fu Liangzi. So, do you feel even a little guilty? Kuan Wuzi's character is not bad. He thought so highly of you, but you killed him without saying a word. Fu Liangzi was silent for a while, then said hatefully, We all serve different masters. Today I was just careless, and I sneaked into Daodong. This kind of thing. There is no right or wrong. Li Yunxin frowned and stared at him for a while. My friend, your values are not right. He did not harm you and treated you very well. Now you say there is no right or wrong. Fu Liangzi didn't want to continue this topic. He turned his head and sneered. You really talk too much. Since you have so much to say, you might as well say it. How did you break my restrictive spell? Li Yunxin curled his lips and looked at him with disgust. How can you ask such a stupid question? Do you know how Yunzi died? That day, he also set up a spell in the city of Wei, but he didn't know that his spell was in my spell. Like you, he used the method of Daotong, using his own body as the eye of the spell to guide the spiritual power of qi. Therefore, His spiritual power of qi circulated in the big spell that I set up in advance, using the spiritual power of his spell to activate my spell. Because of this, his spiritual power was suppressed by my spell, and his strength was less than 10%. Don't you know all this? Fu Liangzi was stunned, then immediately shouted, "What does this have to do with me?" Chapter 274. Li Yunxin sighs. Did you break the inhibition I set when you went up the mountain? Idiot. Do you think it's just an inhibition? It's just to leave your qi and reiki, to help me form the magic circle. It's the same as that day in the city of Wei. You are so stubborn. You never know what is called flexibility. What's more, I know how you use the magic weapon mist of black light, your cultivation, habits and personality. This is called information asymmetry. You don't know anything about me and you still think you can control the whole situation. He bends down and looks at Fu Liangzi. What makes you think you can play with me? Fu Liangzi opens his mouth and wants to say something. But Li Yunxin has already stood up. I don't want to talk to a stupid and bad person like you. I know you want to ask me how I know so much. I will show you now. He walks to the strong body of Fu Liangzi in the mysterious realm and takes out his folding fan. Then he opens the fan and shakes it slightly. A gust of chilly wind comes out from the fan. It lingers on the ground for a while, and then goes into the body. After a while, this Kuan Wuzi sighs in a low voice and slowly sits up. Fu Liangzi's face turns green and white, and then red as if a dye jar has been knocked over. He stares at the sitting Kuan Wuzi, and says, You. Li Yunxin looked on coldly for a while. But this Kuan Wuzi moves very slowly, so he reaches out to pull him up. Then he takes 2 steps back and says seriously, The first time I met you, you didn't kill me. The second time I met you, you persuaded me to leave Dongting and go back to Daotong with you. Although the 2 situations are different for different reasons, I still have a good impression of you. I think you are a good person. In the Pitfall Mountain, Bai Yanjun asked me for your soul, and I protected you. Now I give this body to you. I hope you can remember my kindness. If you encounter anything related to me in the future, think carefully. I'm not a person to be trifled with. After saying this, Li Yunxin sighs. Now you talk to him yourself. Kuan Wuzi. Fu Liangzi was speechless. He looked at Li Yunxin, then at Kuan Wuzi, his gaze changing back and forth. However, Li Yunxin did not intend to tell others that, I am a judge of the Yang world, and I have the book of life and death in my hands. Since Kuan Wuzi, a great cultivator of the profound realm, died nearby, the book of life and death would naturally mark him out, so I immediately took him in before the Yama king. He had already revealed enough secrets. If he were to reveal them out of pride, he would lose a good card. Kuan Wuzi, whose body wasn't very agile, slowly walked in front of Fu Liangliang. After all, his soul had been damaged. Even if the cultivators who had mastered mystical realm had brilliant methods that no one knew about and could ensure that they would not lose their minds, it was still very difficult for them to control a body that did not belong to them. Therefore his expression was very dull. But because of this sluggishness, when he stared at Fu Liangzi, he was even more frightening. After staring at each other for a long time, he finally spoke in an indistinct voice. Each to his own master? There is no right or wrong. You and Tongfu are the 2 disciples that I value the most. You really think that there is no right or wrong? Fu Liangzi wanted to say something but stopped, trying to avoid Kuan Wuzi's gaze. But in the end, he still raised his head and said in a deep voice, My Taoist name is Fu Liangzi. I am not the person that you thought I was for the past 46 years. Kuan Wuzi laboriously let out a low and indistinct laugh. I am not? Although the name is different, could it be that the person for the past 46 years is also different? Fine. Then how do you feel about Linger? Are you also putting on an act? Fu Liangzi suddenly opened his eyes wide, but very quickly, he gritted his teeth and said, Daotong is boring. I just wanted to find some fun for myself. Even if it is a one-sided love, it is better than abandoning all feelings and desires. Good. What a good better than abandoning all feelings and desires. Kuan Wuzi's words gradually became clearer. It seemed that he was slowly getting used to this body. Although there were many inconveniences, he was still able to speak clearly. Then what about your Taoist heart? Since your thoughts all these years are fake, how did your Taoist heart become real? Back then, you said that you wanted to protect the righteous path of the world. This is your Taoist heart. Fu Liangzi laughed. Taoist hearts are for living people like you. Why would a wandering ghost like me need a Taoist heart? While the two were talking, Li Yunxin walked to Li Shan and Qi Jin's side. At this moment, the formation in the hall had been running for a long time. The two demons were getting weaker and weaker, almost unable to open their eyes. Li Yunxin searched their bodies, then threw them aside, and continued to listen to Kuan Wuzi and Fu Liangzi's conversation. But soon, the conversation could not continue. Fu Liangzi began to shut his mouth, allowing Kuan Wuzi to interrogate him again and again. After about half an hour, Li Yunxin walked over and stood between the two. Don't talk here. In the future, when you bring him back to Cloud Mountain, you can slowly interrogate him. Kuan Wuzi was slightly stunned. You are handing him to me? Li Yunxin smiled. He and the other demon are yours, leave Tan Liangzi to me. First, you gave me so much information before. Although you were forced to do so, our cooperation was still very pleasant. Otherwise, today would not have been so smooth. Second, you should know by now. Your Daotong and Kenzo have already been riddled with holes by these people. You have two beloved disciples under you. That Yun Zi and Qing Liangzi of the Freemasonry have been colluding for who knows how long. This Fei Yun Zi was just an impersonator. He hid for 46 years, right under the nose of a mystical realm cultivator like you. And you didn't even notice that he killed you. If not for me, perhaps you wouldn't even be able to keep your soul. So think about it. If you want to start a war with the demons, is this a good time? You are the sect master of Langya Paradise. If others see you like this, your words will naturally carry weight. After listening to Li Yunxin, Kuan Wuzi was silent for a long time. After a long time he said, Why did you do this? Li Yunxin looked at him. Previously, I offended Daotong because of the translucent jade slip. Now it's the demons. Once Daotong and Kenzo start a war with the demons, my situation will not be good. I know the war can't be avoided eventually, but I hope to postpone it as much as possible. Since it will bring trouble to you, it will also bring trouble to the Freemasonry. My parents were killed by their people. And I can get a little respite, strengthen my strength, and try to protect myself. This is all my mind. It's reasonable. I just want to live. In order to live, there are no eternal enemies or friends, only eternal interests. Only eternal interests. Kuan Wuzi frowned and repeated this sentence. After thinking for a while, he wanted to say something but stopped on second thought. Li Yunxin smiled. If you have something to say it. Today in this Dongting, we can talk a lot. But once you return to Daotong, the relationship between us will not be so simple. Maybe the next time we meet, it will be a life and death battle. Kuan Wuzi sighed. It's just that when I see you and listen to you, alas, although you are a demon now, you are also cultivating the way of the heavenly heart. I will tell you a truth. Demons get the power of incense and wish, and they will advance very fast. But, if you don't cultivate your mind, you can only stop at the peak of the Xian realm, and below the Grand Supreme, even if you have a great chance. You are a heaven-bestowed genius. You are expected to advance to the Grand Supreme realm. This sentence can only be said in this Dongting. I don't want you to waste the blessing. You are already in the true state. Do you have the Taoist heart? Li Yunxin looked at him for a while and smiled softly and sincerely. I understand this truth. He thought for a while and said seriously, but I am also a lonely ghost. Kuan Wuzi thought for a while because of his words, but he didn't understand the deep meaning. He sighed and didn't say anything else. He just said, okay, then let's say goodbye. After saying that, he felt in his sleeve and took out a small lantern. He looked at it and sighed. It's also something I gave him. Then he tried to use Reiki, and the lantern immediately emitted bright colorful light. Then he pointed at the quantum of blessing on the ground. Li Yunxin untied the iron chain. The wandering souls of the Freemasonry were immediately sucked into the lantern and no longer made a sound. Then he walked to Li Shan and pointed at her. The eel monster's body also stopped moving at once. The Taoist of the Xian realm collected the two souls, nodded slightly to Li Yunxin, and walked to the door of the hall. But when he was about to go out, he heard Li Yunxin said calmly, "Hey, there is one more thing." Kuan Wuzi stopped and turned around. Li Yunxin looked at him. "You killed all the people in the city of Wei. I lived in that city for a few months, and I have some feelings for it." Kuan Wuzi frowned and looked at him. "Those are all secular people. But you are a demon. Demons won't do these things like me." Li Yunxin tilted his head. "Besides, some of my people are from the Yu family in the city of Wei. You probably don't know the Yu family. But his family was destroyed because of you. If I don't help him, I will lose face. Besides, Dao Dong said that he wants to take care of the people. The people in the city of Wei are also a part of the people. Dao Dong also said that he represents the world of righteousness. But if he doesn't take it seriously, I will be very disappointed." Kuan Wuzi looked at Li Yunxin in confusion. He seemed to want to know if this demon, who was known for being sinister and cunning, was serious. He had lived for hundreds of years. Although he didn't experience the ways of the world like the secular people, he still knew how to read people's expressions. And because of this, he was even more confused, because he felt that this Li Yunxin was really sincere. The two looked at each other for a while, and Kuan Wuzi suddenly looked up at the sky. The sky was blue, and there were a few white clouds. The late summer sun was shining down warmly on his new body. Then Kuan Wuzi, the head of the Lengyi cave, turned his head and said to Li Yunxin, "I understand. Go back to Yunshan and settle these things. I will go to the stone room and destroy my cultivation. If the heavens still care for me, I might be able to cultivate again. If I feel that it is not enough, I will die as a secular person. I swear on my Dao heart." Li Yunxin nodded. "Have a safe journey." Kuan Wuzi turned and left. Chapter 275. Li Yunxin watched him disappear at the bottom of the stairs before turning around. Seeing Lu Laodao, he was a little stunned. "Did you ask him to leave just like that?" Isn't there? Oh, you mean Shanji and the sheriff." Li Yunxin thought for a while. "We can't solve it this time." He turned around and walked back into the hall sighing. "It's enough. We'll keep the treasure." He pointed at the magic treasure fog-locked Toad Palace that was still hanging in the hall. Not just this magic treasure, but also the things that happened before. Scheming against Ling Kongzi, killing Yinzi. Although they were forced to do these things, they won't talk about right or wrong in Daotong. I was the one who killed and crippled them. They also want the translucent jade scroll, which is in my hands. There's no reason to talk about this. They're strong, so they want to take it. But now that Kuan Wuzi has returned, these things can be put aside for the time being. Let's say, we're taking a step back. I know some secrets in Daotong, and they have our people in their hands. Let's make our own bargaining chips. Let's take it as a condition that both sides agree on. They won't give in on this condition, so let's not mention it. But as long as we have some value and deterrence outside of Daotong, they won't have a bad time in Yunshan." Li Yunxin thought for a while. "Because I found a more terrifying enemy for Daotong and Kenzo. The Freemasonry. The demons are external enemies to them. But the Freemasonry has been lurking inside for who knows how long. But there will be a chance. They're my people. They won't just sit back and do nothing." Lu Laodao thought for a while then sighed. "You're right. But I don't know how the two kids are doing." Li Yunxin's expression didn't look happy either. But he was silent for a while, then walked towards the paralyzed Li Shan, saying as he walked, "Let's solve the matter in front of us first." After getting rid of Daodong's people, there was still hatred in Pitfall Mountain. However, since this person has fallen into our hands, he should know a lot of things. All right, now let us ask this snake demon girl. What has she dug out after lurking in the Pitfall Mountain for all these years? He said as he walked. But just as he arrived in front of Snake Spirit 7 Duanjin, he suddenly stopped, as if he had sunk into deep thought. Lu Laodao knew that he was a schemer, so he didn't mind. She just had to wait for him to think it through before speaking. However, this wait lasted for a full quarter of an hour. Then, Lao Dao realized that something was wrong and hurriedly walked to his side to take a look. With just one glance, he immediately stood between the snake spirit and Li Yunxin, so that the latter wouldn't notice anything amiss. Li Yunxin's eyes were motionless. It was as if his soul had been taken away by something. Li Yunxin found that the scene in front of him had suddenly changed. Just a moment ago, he was still in the main hall of the Emperor's Star Palace. The hall was illuminated by the gentle light of the mist-locked Toad Palace. But the next moment his vision suddenly went black. He appeared on a snow-white platform. The sudden change caused him to tense up his muscles, and almost use the sword array he got from Yunzi. But in the next quarter of an hour, nothing happened. In fact, it should be said that there was nothing, except for the platform under his feet. He didn't know what this platform was made of. In this era, to say that an item was not made of gold or jade meant that the material was rare. But Li Yunxin wasn't completely a person of this era. He had broader knowledge. But even with his knowledge, he couldn't figure out what was under his feet. It looked like a cloud that was frozen by some kind of power, and then flattened. There was no sense of touch when stepping on it, as if stepping on empty air. But he knew that it was carrying him, so that he wouldn't fall. And around him was endless darkness. The platform was a huge circle, even bigger than the main hall of the Emperor's Star Palace, and it was also emitting a misty light. But outside this platform, any light was swallowed, and not a trace of it could escape. There was no feeling of warmth or cold. The space was so quiet that he could hear his own heartbeat and blood flow. This silence lasted for a long time, and he felt panic for no reason, as if his body was abandoned and stripped away by the whole world. Although the surrounding space was big and empty, but Li Yunxin really felt a terrible pressure. What is this situation? He vigilantly observed the surrounding situation, and then tried to walk to the edge of the platform and look down. But there was still endless darkness, and there was nothing. Li Yunxin slowly slowed down the rhythm of his breathing to quickly calm himself down. Then he said in a deep voice, "Which master is here? Can you come out and meet me?" But the voice quickly became weak after it left his mouth. It was as if the surrounding dark void could not only absorb light, but also sound. This made his words sound ethereal, as if they came from a very far place, and not from him. But there was finally a response. That Kuan Wuzi said that after he returned to Cloud Mountain, he crippled his cultivation in the stone chamber. Do you know what the stone chamber looks like? It looks like this. The voice suddenly came from all directions, as if countless people were speaking at the same time. But this voice was familiar to Li Yunxin. Bai Yanjun. So he heaved a sigh of relief, but he also frowned slightly. The next moment, Bai Yanjun suddenly appeared 5 steps away from him. But he didn't look at him, and only paced slowly on the platform, talking to himself. You've been here for 15 minutes, and you already feel uncomfortable. But if that Kuan Wuzi really went to the stone chamber, according to Daodong's tradition, he has to stay for more than a month. There is no sound in this place, and it's all empty space. If you stay here for a long time, you will be able to hear your own breathing and heartbeat. But this is still good, at least there is sound. If you stay here for a while longer, you won't even be able to hear the sound of your own body. After Bai Yanjun said all this, his gaze finally fell on Li Yunxin. This is the vacuum hell, the second level of the 18 levels of hell. It can't be considered too terrible of a suffering. But how do you feel now? Li Yunxin took a deep breath, and said honestly, to people like me, it is indeed very terrible. Bai Yanjun narrowed his eyes and stared at him for a while, then shook his head. His face didn't have the lively expression that he had when they met previously, but became serious and solemn. Before you there were 63 people who came here. Some stayed here for a day, some stayed for a month, and some stayed for a year. As Bai Yanjun spoke, he slowly walked towards him, and looked at him calmly. They were all disobedient, so we had to use this method to make them behave. And then 12 died. Some of them died in a month, and some of them lasted almost a year before they died. Among them, some didn't have as much cultivation as you, and some were much stronger than you. But to tell the truth, This monarch really didn't want to see you here. Because you are an interesting person, this monarch likes you. Bai Yanjun had already walked in front of Li Yunxin and was face to face with him. Then his two thin eyebrows rose up like a viper's, and he said darkly, "But you, why didn't you listen?" Li Yunxin was silent for a while. Then he slowly took a step back and looked at Bai Yanjun. "Monarch, please tell me, where did I do wrong?" Bai Yanjun's expression finally relaxed. He sneered. "Where? When this monarch was at Pitfall Mountain, I told you to hand over the remnant soul of Kun Wuzi to me. You didn't hand it over. So be it. Because what you said was useful. After that, what did this monarch tell you to do?" Li Yunxin replied in a low voice. "Tell me to involve the Freemasonry." Bai Yanjun suddenly raised his head and turned around. After a few steps he looked back at him. "Aha! You know it. But how did you do it?" "You told that Daotong to stop his army." "Ah, it's because of this." Li Yunxin smiled. Bai Yanjun stared at him. "This? Did I ask you to do anything else?" "Don't be angry, monarch. Listen to me." Li Yunxin was not afraid because of his terrible attitude. He even smiled again. "This is my original plan. I will go to Pitfall Mountain and persuade Evil King to take a group of demons to the city of Wei. The demons of the mysterious realm and the Taoists of the mysterious realm will fight, which will cause a local large-scale war. Then, Bai Yunxin will take the dragon soul from the lake, and Daotong will be more anxious. In this way, there are demons and the dragon soul, and they can't take care of it. Then they will have no time to take care of me. I can easily escape from Dongting and find a place to strengthen my force. But when Yamajun asked me to involve the Freemasonry, I took the risk. I even put a few of my people in danger. Sanhua's body was destroyed. Making temporary adjustments at such a price, I made the Freemasonry a thorn in Daotong's side and brought it to the table. Yamajun, look. The Freemasonry has now been involved in this matter by me. And the price is that I become a thorn in the Freemasonry's side. I can't disappear from Daotong's sight. Both sides regard me as the focus. I put myself in danger. And Yamajun, your request is world chaos. This chaos will come a little later. It may be a month later, a year later, or 10 years later, but it will come eventually. If what I'm doing isn't considered working, then what is? Li Yunxin sighed. I'm working hard for you, but you treat me like this. I am very sad. Bai Yanjun listened to him saying so much, but he just smiled faintly. You are a smart person, so you don't have to pretend to be confused. Let me ask you, do you think I want to be friends and partners with you? Li Yunxin bowed his head slightly. I dare not have such improper thoughts. Then since you don't have these thoughts, you should know that I want a person to do things. I don't care about your situation. I only care about how you do what I ask you to do. Even if you are smashed to pieces in the end, you will do things well. This is good. Bai Yanjun squinted at Li Yunxin. So, do you understand? Don't delay my business because of you. Li Yunxin was silent for a while and looked up at him. What happened? The current you is very different from the previous you. Bai Yanjun's face didn't change, but he became silent. Li Yunxin thought for a while, and showed a sincere and serious expression on his face. You were not like this before. I mean, I don't expect to be friends or partners with people like you. But at least we used to get along well. Whether it was because I was being careful and deliberately, or you knew it but enjoyed it. Generally speaking, we used to be very happy when you helped me and I helped you. But since Pitfall Mountain, I think you became anxious. There are many things I don't know. But there is one thing I think I can guess a little bit. You said there were people like me before me. You also wanted them to do things for you. But in the end, they didn't succeed. I thought about it. And I think the one who was closest to me is the art saint. Li Yunxin looked at Bai Yanjun. According to the legend of Daotong and Kenzo, the art saint turned into a demon 1,000 years ago. I guess he probably wanted to do things for you, to provoke a war between the demons and the world's Taoist sections. But because of some reasons he failed. So you see, the art saint made it to the position of the 3 sages but still failed. Li Yunxin sighed and spread his hands. And I am still in the true state. I know you must be rushing me because of some urgent matters. But the problem is that I think I have luck, ability, and talent. Even you said you like me very much. In that case, I'm probably the most suitable person in your hands right now. Hurry, 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 hurry. Once I mess things up, where can you find a good employee like me? Li Yunxin looked at him. And whether you want me to do things or risk my life, you need to give me a goal or a plan. Even a donkey needs a carrot to pull the mill. You told me before that you have two threats. One is an ancient demon, and the other is a true demon. Can you tell me a little? Bai Yanjun was silent for a while, and then sneered. How dare you? You actually guessed the art saint. But let me tell you, your guess is not all right. As for the ancient demon and the true demon, it's not something you should know. Well, it's not something you should know now. But the art saint left something in the Pitfall Mountain. Li Yunxin frowned. What is the skeleton in the bottomless pit under the Pitfall Mountain? I believe the art saint's arrangements were all for the sake of the skeleton. Besides, you have to know that hatred and evil king may be outside the Dongting to make trouble for me. If I fight with them later and break the skeleton, it doesn't matter, right? Bai Yanjun suddenly raised his eyebrows. How dare you? But Li Yunxin was not afraid. Instead, he smiled slightly. So, the skeleton really has something to do with the ancient demon and the true demon? Bai Yanjun stared at him. After a while, the serious indifference on his face finally melted. He sighed deeply. Alas, you are such a troublesome little devil. Ben Jun, why can't I put down this face with you? Because I have to know that what I am doing now is not evil like destroying the world. It's not a happy thing to dig my own grave, Li Yunxin said with a gentle smile. And you see, it's better to talk like this than when you played the bad guy. I really thought you were going to keep me here for a month. However, Bai Yanjun became silent after hearing his last sentence. Li Yunxin was stunned. Are you really going to keep me here for a month? Chapter 276. Bai Yanjun looked up at him, but didn't say anything. But he looked like he was hesitating and weighing, trying to make a difficult decision. After a while he said, You should know, this is the 18th layer of hell, inside this sphere. In this place, the spiritual energy of heaven and earth is condensed inside, which is far from what the mortal realm can compare with. If I really let you stay here for a month, and you can restrain your thoughts to endure the pain of the vacuum and cultivate properly, you will make tremendous progress. Think again, do you want to stay? But Li Yunxin didn't think about it at all, and said without hesitation, No. Bai Yanjun raised his eyebrows in surprise. Huh? Why is that? Do you know how much convenience I've given you? I don't know about those people in the past, but I know myself. I'll go crazy. Li Yunxin said seriously. For me, the mind is as important a weapon as the body. I refuse to take any risks at this point. Moreover, according to what you just said, so many people have stayed here. And this place can be said to have rapid cultivation progress. Then they should all become very strong in the end. But the problem is that they all walked this path. But in the end, they didn't succeed. It's clear that this kind of thing isn't a decisive factor. So even if I have to risk going crazy to try here, now is not the time. He thought for a while. But this won't be the only chance, right? I mean, what if I change my mind later? It depends on my mood. Bai Yanjun frowned. He stared at Li Yunxin for a while, then sighed. Fine. If you don't want to stay, then don't stay. You just asked me about the skeleton. Now I'll let you know. But once you know, you really have no way out. From now on, no one in this world can know. And you must keep these words until you die. Do you still want to hear it? Li Yunxin said, Yes. Then listen carefully. I'll only say it once, I won't explain again. Bai Yanjun's expression became solemn, and his speech became slower, which gave Li Yunxin an illusion. It was as if he had passed a checkpoint, and now it was time for the official unveiling of the plot. You also know about the arrangements left behind by the art saint. You should also know the stories he left behind. According to the legends of the Pitfall Mountain, the ancient devil was dug out from the ground. You can slowly understand the deeper meaning of this. It was also said that the primordial ancient devil had appeared, and that old devil Fulu and the 7 sons had to work together to suppress it. you can slowly understand the profound meaning behind this. If you want to know more, there is a reason why the evil king is guarding the bottomless pit of Pitfall Mountain. It's not convenient for me to tell you these things one by one, but in the end, those who understood would naturally understand. If you don't understand, then you're not someone who should understand. After Bai Yanjun said all this, he stared fixedly at Li Yunxin. For example, if you understand now, then I have chosen the right person. If you don't understand, then you're not the person I'm looking for. But, he smiled wickedly, of course you're that person. Before you, in these several thousand years, the dozens of people were all like that. Now that you know these things, what do you think? Li Yunxin was slightly stunned. If he didn't misunderstand, what Bai Yanjun meant was that he had said 3 profound meanings in a row. Now that he had said them, Li Yunxin should be suddenly enlightened and immediately understand what these 3 profound meanings meant. Moreover, this sudden enlightenment had nothing to do with IQ or EQ. It was more like a secret code that had long been agreed upon among a certain group of people. But the problem was he didn't understand. Right now he didn't understand at all. He didn't even have the slightest clue. His heart suddenly skipped a beat. Where did the problem lie? This Bai Yanjun had always told him that he was the special person he had chosen. Li Yunxin knew what was special about him. He was a transmigrator, and he also thought that Bai Yanjun should know about this. This Yama king might not know the nature of a transmigrator, but he must have dealt with transmigrators before and knew that he was the same kind of person as them. Then, taking care of him as a transmigrator was for what he had said, to support him to grow up so that he could work for them, to do something that only transmigrators could do well. Until now Li Yunxin felt that these things were logical. He also believed that he was indeed the person Bai Yanjun was looking for. He was in a sense the person chosen by the heavens. But now, things seemed to have gone horribly wrong. He didn't know the profound meaning that the certain kind of person chosen by Bai Yanjun should know. What is this situation? This situation was like, he had bumped into a classroom in a daze. He found that there were 26 familiar English letters written on the blackboard in the classroom. So, he calmed down and began to listen to the lesson. But after listening for a while, he slowly realized he didn't seem to understand. After a while he realized, it wasn't the English classroom. It was the French classroom. Could it be that he wasn't the person he was looking for, but was mistaken for that person by a freak combination of factors? He blinked. He realized that Bai Yanjun was still staring at him. So he took a deep breath and suppressed the shock in his heart. Then, he narrowed his eyes slightly and said in a deep voice, "Is this what happened? Is this what happened?" Then he spread his hands slightly and looked at Bai Yanjun. I really don't know." Seeing his reaction, Bai Yanjun was stunned. Then he frowned slightly. "Your reaction is really strange." The people who knew about these things didn't react like this. As he spoke, he moved closer to Li Yunxin and looked at him carefully. Then he walked around him with narrowed eyes and stopped behind him. The hair on Li Yunxin's body immediately stood up. He didn't know. Did this Bai Yanjun find out something? Did he find out that he didn't understand his words? This terrible stagnation lasted for a breath's time. But Li Yunxin felt that an entire hour had passed. Then this Bai Yanjun suddenly laughed strangely. This is how you should act. With your current cultivation, what else can you do besides acting like this? Then he slowly walked to the front of Li Yunxin. Then, since you already know this, you should understand what you are doing with me. You should understand what you are cooperating with Ben Jun to do in the end. How could Li Yunxin understand what he was talking about? He only hated himself for getting to the bottom of it just now. But at the moment, he could only nod ambiguously. Okay. However, he could only nod ambiguously. Alright. Now that I know, I think I have more things to do. Yan Jun, let's talk. Can you call me out immediately? Since I know, I think I have more things to do. That hatred and evil king may cause more trouble. Bai Yanjun looked at him with a smile. Do you really want to go out? Li Yunxin nodded seriously. He was afraid that something would happen again. The White Hell Lord actually laughed again and said without hesitation, "That's good too." I'll send you out. But you have to know, this is the second level of the 18 levels of hell, the hell of vacuum. One level above is the first level, the hell of rebirth. I will tell you to go back from there. When he said this, his tone was strange, as if there was another meaning hidden in his heart. But Li Yunxin couldn't hear it. This Bai Yanjun had too many secrets, he didn't even have a clue. He only felt that there might be something strange about the hell of rebirth mentioned by Bai Yanjun. But how could he know what was strange about it? He could only take a deep breath and was about to say, "Then let's go." But everything in front of him suddenly twisted. Then he heard some kind of strange but familiar voice. As soon as this voice appeared, he felt his head go numb. A terrible feeling of suffocation hit him like an avalanche, as if his head was pressed under water, and he couldn't breathe. Even his hands and feet were tied tightly. He couldn't struggle. Li Yunxin suddenly shouted, but his voice was immediately choked by a mouthful of water. He desperately wanted to cough out the water in his lungs, but the second mouthful of water came in, and he couldn't squeeze out any air from his lungs. How could he cough? It was this terrible painful experience that made him suddenly open his eyes. He woke up. His swaying vision, the dark and cobweb-covered ceiling. His vision began to turn dark because of the extreme lack of oxygen, and there were spots of light. A man with a twisted face was holding a water bottle, slowly pouring water on his face. At this time, Li Yunxin realized that his mouth and nose were covered with several layers of towels. The towels were soaked and stuck to his face. He couldn't breathe, and all he experienced was the feeling of suffocation like he was drowning. And the man slowly poured water on his face, as if he was enjoying the process. He even took a puff of smoke, and then puffed the smoke out of his mouth. But Li Yunxin couldn't smell the smoke. At this moment, he was on the verge of losing consciousness. But his mind suddenly became extremely clear. He moved his eyes spasmodically, and saw this strange but familiar room. It looked like an abandoned, unfinished building. It should be in the suburbs. It was night. A portable flashlight hung on the concrete wall to illuminate the room. He was tied to 2 tables. His hands and feet were tied by belts, and he couldn't move. Another 2 people were beating his legs with wooden sticks, starting from his toes, all the way to his knees, and smashing every inch of his bones. The terrible feeling of suffocation, and the terrible pain, were like sharp knives cutting his extremely clear consciousness. This kind of pain and experience, it was very familiar. He died of waterboarding. Eat me, huh? The man who poured water on his face glared and roared at him with a twisted face. Eat me? He raised his hand and smashed down. But the next moment, the world suddenly became quiet. All the sound and pain disappeared. Li Yunxin opened his eyes. He saw Lu Laodao standing in front of him, staring at him in panic. The late summer afternoon sun was shining into the nave of Ziwei Palace. Chapter 277. He looked at Lu Laodao for a while, and then took a deep breath, like a drowning man suddenly coming to the surface, getting rid of the suffocating state. Then he took 2 steps back, and his right hand grabbed the door frame that was heated by the sun to stabilize his body. He took 2 or 3 deep breaths, his eyelashes trembling violently, staring straight into the void in front of him. After staring for a while, he suddenly shook his head. The focus of his eyes fell on Lu Laodao again. Laodao was startled by this sudden change. He hurriedly caught up with Li Yunxin, holding his shoulder, and whispered, "Brother Xian, what's wrong?" Li Yunxin grabbed his hand with a backhand. Her strength was so strong that it seemed like she was going to crush his bones. But Lu Laodao noticed his eyes. There was a hint of panic in his eyes, like a frightened child. It was like a frightened child grabbing his grandfather's hand tightly, and looking at a completely foreign world in horror. Lu Laodao. It was the first time that he saw such an expression on Li Yunxin's face. But this expression was fleeting. Li Yunxin seemed to have just woken up from a long nightmare. He was muddle-headed before, but he quickly regained consciousness. After holding his hand for 2 breaths, Li Yunxin realized that he had lost his composure. He was stunned for a while, and then looked around. After confirming that everything was still, a long time ago, he slowly let go of his hand, and let his breathing calm down. Red Lady and Qi Duanjin on the ground looked at him in surprise. Li Yunxin didn't know how to explain. For a moment, he couldn't figure out which part was real and which part was in his memory. The scene before his death was so real that it seemed like it was a dream. Was that the reborn in hell that Bai Yanjun mentioned? He was silent for a while, and then he spat. Damn. No one knew who he was cursing or what he was cursing. In the eyes of others, Li Yunxin had just sent off Kuan Wuzi before turning around and walking towards Qi Duanjin, who was lying on the ground, to ask some questions. However, just as he walked in front of her, he suddenly froze and became lost in thought. He was stunned for only 2 breaths of time. And then it turned out like this. Lu Laodao withdrew his hand and slowly shook it. He realized that it was not a big deal. She then stood in front of Li Yunxin and stared into his eyes, asking, "Brother Xan, what's wrong with you?" Li Yunxin blinked and opened his mouth. After thinking for a while, he finally said, "I had a nightmare." Lu Laodao frowned, not understanding the meaning of this sentence. However, Li Yunxin smiled and said, "It doesn't matter. I just. He looked over Lu Laodao's shoulder and into the hall. What he set up on Mount June was the formation that Kuan Wuzi instructed him to set up. That day, Kuan Wuzi was killed and his remnant soul escaped. Li Yunxin caught him in time and saved him from the tragic fate of having his body and soul destroyed. Thus, the two of them quickly reached an agreement on how to deal with the Freemasons. The experience of a profound realm cultivator and the meticulous techniques of Taoist Danqing made the formation on Mount June quite successful. Daotong's formation absorbed the spiritual energy of the Daotong cultivators and supplied it to Li Yunxin, who had become weak because of the death of one of his clones. Thus, Qi Duanjin was suppressed in the formation and couldn't even move a finger. Her cultivation wasn't high to begin with. Li Yunxin looked at her, then at Lu Laodao and sighed. "Don't be anxious. Come with me for a walk." Lu Laodao knew that something big must have happened in a short time just now. So much so that Li Yunxin couldn't keep calm, and didn't even have the mood to continue to ask the female monster some questions. He turned to look at Red Lady. The princess of Dongting waved her hand weakly, and motioned them to look at the female monster by herself. But her eyes kept turning to Li Yunxin. Li Yunxin and Lu Laodao went out. Lu Laodao found that Brother Xian walked very steadily. This steadiness actually referred to his pace. Every step he took was very hard. The soles of his feet stepped on the ground and slightly sank. It was like a person walking deliberately wanted to experience the feeling of stepping on the ground. The two walked all the way to the square in front of the nave. The stone bricks on the ground were hot because of the sun. A few water birds could be seen flying in the sky from afar. But from here, the birds flew very slowly like white kites. There was no wind today. The leaves of the trees on the edge of the square were languid. In fact, it was a good day. Li Yunxin stood in the sun and looked into the distance for a while. He sighed heavily and said, "There's a little trouble." The old Taoist calmed down a little when he heard him speak. He asked, "What's the matter?" Li Yunxin squinted and looked around in the sun. He said first, "It's about the skeleton in the Pitfall Mountain." At this point he paused. Bai Yanjun came and went like a ghost. Li Yunxin was not sure whether he would listen to the conversation between him and Lu Laodao now. But according to his previous experience, Black Bai Yanjun seemed to be very busy and had no time to play tricks like eavesdropping. And after the previous life, Li Yunxin knew that Black Bai Yanjun had more terrible means. He could pull his soul away when he was unprepared. With this kind of ability, they shouldn't be involved in shady business anymore. He said the same sentence to test the waters. Nothing happened. He was relieved and frowned at Lu Laodao. "I told you about Bai Yanjun, didn't I?" The old Taoist was stunned. I only mentioned it occasionally." "Why? That king of hell. Isn't he helping you?" "He still is." Li Yunxin hesitated for a while and said in a low voice, "But they may have made a mistake. I may not be the one they want to help." Lao Dao pondered for a while before he understood the meaning of this sentence. In fact, in his opinion, the concept of King of Hell helping Brother Xen was similar to God protecting the Emperor. Black Bai Yanjun and God were sacred and mysterious existences in the hearts of ordinary people. He had heard Li Yunxin mention it occasionally, and had some impression, but he never thought that the way Li Yunxin and Bai Yanjun got along was actually very secular. Or it was more like hiring or trading. It had nothing to do with the word protection at all. After thinking for a while, Lao Dao frowned and said, "What do you mean? Is there a mistake? Is there someone else?" Li Yunxin let out a long breath and looked at him with a strange look. "Yes. That's what I'm worried about. There's someone else. I'm worried that at this moment in a corner of this world, there is a guy that Black Bai Yanjun is really waiting for. Damn." He frowned and paced a few steps, then turned to look at Lu Laodao. "You know what? It's like I'm a fake crown prince, and that person is the real crown prince. Now the real crown prince is wandering outside, I know, but the emperor doesn't." This vivid and simple metaphor made Lu Laodao understand what Li Yunxin meant in an instant. He was stunned. "Then what should we do?" Li Yunxin sighed. "What else can we do? What do the villains do in such a situation? Of course, kill the real crown prince before the emperor knows the truth." Chapter 278. After listening to his words, Lao Dao frowns and thinks for a while. Then he says hesitantly, "Brother Xian, can you tell me more details? It's just that you are not in a good state now." As he says so, he reaches out and lifts Li Yunxin's back. A corner of his robe is stepped on, but Li Yunxin doesn't notice it at all. Li Yunxin is stunned. Although he is unrestrained, he is a person who cares about his image very much. Now he even ignores such a detail on his body. It can be seen that he is confused. If he is confused, it is easy to draw wrong or partial conclusions. Lu Laodao is worried about this. He understands Lu Laodao's kindness. He also realizes that the person beside him is probably the only one in the world who can keep up with his thoughts and have a good talk with him. He is a little touched in his heart, so he tries to calm himself down slowly. After calming down, he recounted the matter to old Lu in a way that he could hear. "This thing, I'll give you an example. For example, we set up a little monster protection association in Dongting. Now we are going to destroy Daotong. As for you, old Lu, you should go and infiltrate the orthodoxy first. Then, our people will lurk in Daotong to make trouble. For example, the password of the dragon cult is Dragon Cult Master. Enjoy immortal happiness forever. Now a monster goes to Daotong, and you say Dragon Cult Master when you meet him. The monster will naturally know the next sentence is enjoy immortal happiness forever. So you confirm each other's identities in Daotong, right?" Lu Laodao thinks for a while. "So, Daotong is like our world, and I in Daotong is like Black Bai Yanjun?" Li Yunxin nods, "Yes. As for the demons that infiltrated Daotong, they were just like the people who came to this world before me. Don't be surprised. I have only recently learned that others like myself have come into the world." Then came the problem, old Lu. "Now that you're in Daotong, you know that Daotong is full of people. Once you recognize a fiendish demon, what will you think? You will definitely think that it's one of us little fiendish demons. But one day, you found out that a demon had sneaked into Daotong. It was a demon. You must think that our little demon protector is here to cause trouble. So you took good care of him. As for that fiendish demon, he's not even on our side. It's just that he became a Taoist in the wilderness, and he accidentally broke into the orthodoxy. Old Lu, you took care of him. He also felt that, this old Lu also looked like he was going to cause trouble in the orthodoxy. So naturally we're allies. Until one day, old Lu, you told him that dragon cult leader, but he didn't know what it meant." Li Yunxin points at himself. "I'm that demon. That's the situation now. But the problem is that I already know a lot of secrets. Once I'm found out that I'm not that person, I don't know what will happen to me." After listening to his words, Lu Laodao is silent for a while. Then he slightly nodded. Then he rubbed his hands. "I see. This is really a troublesome matter. How does Brother Xian plan to find that real crown prince?" Li Yunxin walked a few steps in the sunlight, raised his hand and rubbed his face. "You've asked the right question. It's because I thought of this question that I suddenly realized something. Then these things made me even more confused. You see, if I want to find someone with a similar identity as me, what should I do? Li Yunxin thought for a while. I have to leave a lot of secret codes and imprints in this world. Only the person I'm looking for can understand them. I thought of this method, and carefully thought about it. Someone has done this before. The art saint did it. And another group of people did it, the Freemasons. Don't ask me how I know, because I've found the secret codes they left behind. Speaking of this, he raised his eyes to look at the hall. This means there may be some things I don't know. But I've had enough. I don't like guessing at all. Now there are so many clues in front of me. So many clues. It seems that each clue can lead to a lot of mysteries and answers. But I don't want to be greedy anymore. Instead, I want to at least figure out one thing first. Li Yunxin took a deep breath. For example, figure out what kind of people the Freemasons are. Lao Dao had always respected Li Yunxin's decisions, but he was a little worried at this time. He hesitated for a moment and said, "But Brother Xan, you have to be careful when you do things. After all, that's Yamajun." "Yes, it's Yamajun." Li Yunxin was silent for a while, and said regretfully, "He helped me a lot before, and I used to think that at least for a period of time, we would still get along. But now I know, the honeymoon period is over. But I also know another thing. Black Bai Yanjun is not omnipotent. At least they mistook my identity, and some things still need my help to do. They may be gods, but they are not gods in the eyes of those mortals. The real gods should be the ones who make the rules. But the two of them, in my opinion, are just powerful people who are good at playing with the rules. They are not the masters. Of course, maybe there are no masters at all." Li Yunxin narrowed his eyes and looked into the distance. There was a figure approaching. From this point of view, this is the limited fairness of this world. Everyone is just a player. She's back. As they spoke, the figure in the distance appeared in front of them and landed on the square in the hall. Bai Yunxin walked a few steps to Li Yunxin and looked into the hall. "It's done." Li Yunxin smiled at her. "What's the situation outside?" Bai Yunxin seemed relieved. He then said to Li Yunxin sternly, "Yazi is outside. But he can't come in for the time being. The evil king is not here. He will come sooner or later. Thank you for your hard work." Li Yunxin waved his hand at Bai Yunxin. "Then I'll go back and ask the demoness how her king is now." But Bai Yunxin reached out and stopped him. "Li Yunxin, I'm going to get the dragon soul." Li Yunxin was stunned. "Now? Today? You told me to wait earlier, and I've already waited for a long time. I can't wait any longer." Bai Yunxin's tone was calm. Her hair was gently swaying in the breeze at the end of summer. At least at this time, she didn't look gloomy and horrible like a demon. She looked gentle. Li Yunxin frowned slightly and looked at the beautiful woman in front of him. "But the inhibition of Dongting relies on the dragon soul. If you take away the dragon soul, the inhibition will be gone. I will be in danger." Bai Yunxin suddenly laughed. "Don't you know? The dragon soul has been taken away. Now the inhibition of Dongting is not supported by the dragon soul, but by the remaining power of the dragon in the flood dragon bones under the water." "What?" Bai Yunxin smiled and pushed Li Yunxin aside. She took a step forward. Then she suddenly turned into a gust of wind and rushed into the inner hall of the middle hall. She caught Red Lady. There was an inhibition set by Li Yunxin in the middle of the middle hall. But he hesitated for a while. He didn't know why Bai Yunxin attacked him at this moment. However, after a while, Bai Yunxin had gone out with Red Lady. She grabbed Princess Dongting's wrist and locked her acupoints with Wacken. They stood on the cornice of the middle hall. Their sleeves were flying like two fairies who were about to fly away. Bai Yunxin looked at Dragon Sun in the square. The dragon soul is in her body. The dragon soul is sealed in a piece of Jianmu, and that piece of Jianmu was refined by Lord Dongting into his daughter's body. "Li Yunxin, don't you know?" Li Yunxin didn't know what to say for a while. Did he know? He saw Lord Dongting skewered a fish with a branch and roasted it on a fire. Later, he knew that the fish was the real body of Red Lady. He still remembered that Red Lady told him before that killing him could unlock the inhibition of Dongting. Was that also a hint? He stood on the ground, took a deep breath, and then exhaled deeply. He raised his hand and knocked on his forehead. Then he didn't put his hand down. He raised his head to block the sun and said to Bai Yunxin helplessly, "Even so, you don't have to do this. I thought we had a good relationship. Damn it. Why do things like this always happen today? Why don't you talk it out? What are you going to do like this? Kidnap? Kidnap? Haven't I promised you that I would help you break the engagement?" Bai Yunxin slightly raised her head and looked at Li Yunxin. The smile on her face slowly became cold, but she didn't know if it was for Li Yunxin. "I also want to believe you, but this kind of thing, how can I give my life to others?" As Bai Yunxin said, she raised her hand to fix Red Lady's messy hair bun, as if she was playing with a plaything. "She has the dragon soul. I will take her away and find a way to take the dragon soul out of her. I can deal with my foster father myself." Li Yunxin frowned. "If I remember correctly, last time I asked you why you listened to King Rock, your answer was, 'After all, he is my foster father.' Because at that time I didn't know what kind of person you were. A monster." Bai Yunxin looked at him. "Now I know a little bit, so I am more worried. On one hand, I thought you would really go to my foster father for me. On the other hand, I thought you were likely to sell me to the divine dragon. So, I am afraid." Li Yunxin laughed out loud. "Afraid? 3 months ago, I was scared that you would eat me. Now you say you are afraid of me?" Bai Yunxin looked at him with a smile. "That is why I am more afraid of you. Besides," she thought for a while, and her face became serious, "Shinryu will be here soon. That is why I am in a hurry to leave. Once I am stopped by him, I will not be able to leave." Li Yunxin was shocked. "How do you know?" Bai Yunxin looked at him strangely. "I have dominated the world for thousands of years, and my foster father is the golden-winged rock king. Do you really think you know all my tricks?" Li Yunxin thought for a while and sighed. "You are right. You're also a great demon that can roam the world. I was thinking about how to make you my arm, but you're too weak. Now that I look at it again, sure enough, everyone is the protagonist in their own world. I am looking at others from the protagonist's point of view. Maybe in your world, I am the supporting character?" Bai Yunxin listened to his strange words and slightly frowned. But Li Yunxin smiled again. "But what are you going to do with her?" At this time Red Lady said, "Don't worry, my dear." Because her body was locked, she spoke weakly. But in fact she used to speak like this. "The dragon soul is indeed in my body. But it is also very easy to take it out. I will let her go. There is no hatred between me and the golden-winged rock princess. After taking the dragon soul, she will not make things difficult for me. There is nothing to worry about." Then he looked at Bai Yunxin. "Am I right?" Bai Yunxin thought for a while. "If you don't make trouble, I will not hurt you for the sake that I come to Dongting for insect meat every year." Red Lady smiled at Li Yunxin. Li Yunxin still wanted to say something, but Bai Yunxin turned her head to the northwest and carried him up to the sky without saying anything. She only said, "The dragon soul has left the lake, and the dragon chi at the bottom of the lake has become a tree without roots. This inhibition can still last for 1 more day. You are on your own now." Bai Yunxin's personal ability was higher than Li Yunxin's. His doppelganger was killed, and he had a lot of worries in his heart. How could he catch up with her? When he first saw Bai Yunxin, he only remembered that she was sniffing him like a beast. And these days, after getting along with her for a long time, he could talk to her like a secular person. But at this time, Li Yunxin realized that deep down, Bai Yunxin was still the monster he met for the first time that night. She was powerful and beautiful, and she was never willing to be anyone's vassal. In essence, she was similar to Li Yunxin. It was hard for them to really trust someone, especially someone who might be stronger than them. He stared at the direction where Bai Yunxin went for a while and sighed in a low voice. Red Lady said that the dragon's soul could be taken out. What do you think? Lu Laodao thought for a while. Brother Xan, let's go to the hall first and interrogate the witch. Li Yunxin stood in silence for a while, looked into the distance and sighed again. Bai Yunxin and Red Lady ran for 30 miles in one breath, and then left Dongting through Bai Yunxin's summer palace. After leaving Dongting, The little maid and the black donkey were already waiting in the forest. This was the west bank of Dongting, and there was a big lake between it and the city of Wei. Usually, Bai Yunxin liked to ride the black donkey. Today, it seemed that she was really afraid of being chased. Seeing the maid, she said, "We can't stay here for a long time. I won't take it with me." It seemed that it was not the first time for the maid to see this kind of thing. She nodded first, and then turned to look at the black donkey. She raised her hand and hit on the head of the donkey. How could the beast withstand such a force? He didn't even have the time to cry out. His forelegs stiffened, and he fell to the ground head first. Red Lady widened her eyes. She heard Li Yunxin talking about the adopted daughter of Golden Rock a few days ago. She knew that the most unusual thing about her was that she had a ride. It was a shiny black donkey with a small piece of red cloth tied to its forehead. A great monster in the realm of truth, who could travel thousands of miles in an instant, rode a donkey. It could be seen that the donkey was extraordinary. When the atmosphere between them was still normal, they had talked about what the original body of the donkey was, and how it could follow Bai Yunxin to travel the world for so long and experience so many dangers. But now, it was killed by such a palm in front of her. Seeing her shocked look, Bai Yunxin said lightly, "It's just an animal. Why are you shocked? Don't you usually eat bloody food?" At this time, the maid had already cut open the skin of the donkey with her fingers like a knife. First, she picked up the soft internal organs, such as hearts and livers, and then she turned her wrist and put them away. She probably put them in her summer palace. Then, she cracked open the head of the donkey and put away the white brain inside. After that, she picked up some tender meat. In the end, there was still more than half of the donkey's meat left, but she was too lazy to cook it. She straightened up and said to Bai Yunxin, "This donkey's meat is old. It's not as good as the previous one." Red Lady was surprised and said, "Is this just an ordinary donkey?" Bai Yunxin tilted her head and looked at her. "What else could it be? You can play with it, and when you get tired of it, you can eat it. What kind of treasure do you think it is?" Red Lady sighed. "Lian, I guess for so long in vain." Bai Yunxin originally planned to take her away, but when she mentioned Li Yunxin, she slowed down and turned to look at her. Suddenly, she squinted and smiled. "You told Li Yunxin in Dongting that the dragon soul was easy to get. Since it is easy to get, you can take it out here. I will take the dragon soul far away, and you can go back to Dongting by yourself, okay?" Red Lady stroked her hair and smiled. "Sister, do you believe what I said at that time?" Bai Yunxin thought for a while. "I heard that the Lord Dongting refined the Jianmu into your body. That is the integration of life and death. According to what I said, I can't take it out without harming myself. Maybe you have some unique method." Red Lady looked at her. "No." Bai Yunxin blinked her eyes, pretending to be surprised. "If you take the dragon soul out by force, won't you die? You are now a ghost cultivator with Yin spirit. You can't come back to life if you die again." Red Madam still smiled leisurely, yes. The little maid listened to their conversation, but she couldn't tell what expression she had on her face. One was her master, and the other was the princess of the place where she was born. She could only walk away slowly after being silent for a while, alert to the sound nearby. And Bai Yunxin stared at Red Lady for a while, and her voice suddenly became soft. "Why didn't you tell him at that time?" Red Lady turned around and glanced at the direction of Dongting through the dense forest. It was a pity that the trees were so lush that she couldn't see the water. She said in a low voice, "Yazi and Evil King are outside the lake. You also said that Shinryu would come. Every single one of them could have taken his life." After a while, she heard Bai Yunxin behind her snorted, "I can think of it, but he may not." Red Lady turned around and smiled. "He is only a teenager. And he just got the Tao. If he doesn't know enough about some things, he will naturally think that there is a cheap and easy way. How can you blame him? It's just wishful thinking." Bai Yunxin snorted again. "If you have enough lingering about it, go to hell." Red Lady smiled and shook her head. "It's just my obsession as a ghost cultivator with Yin spirit. I know it, but I can't get rid of it." "But big sister, are you unhappy because I mentioned him?" Bai Yunxin ignored her. She reached out to buckle her wrist, and took her to the forest like a whirlwind. Chapter 279. The two beautiful demonesses, each with their own thoughts, fled into the dense forest. Let's talk about Li Yunxin. His hands were stained with fresh blood. The blood came from 7th Duanjin's body. The demoness used to be pretty, but now she could no longer be seen. Her face was swollen like a steamed bun. Not to mention, squeezing her eyes into a slit. She couldn't even see a slit. Her limbs were bent at strange angles, as if they were broken by someone. Not just once but several times. His clothes were already in tatters, and his flesh had bloomed like a flower. It was not even cut, but torn open while he was still alive. And Li Yunxin was standing in front of her, breathing heavily. His fists were torn, and the blood on them was both the demoness and his own. Lu Laodao's eyes and mouth were wide open, but he couldn't say anything. 7th Duanjin was a demon at the peak of the transcendent state, while Li Yunxin was at the true state. The difference between the transcendent state and the true state couldn't be measured with logic. Logically speaking, Li Yunxin should have been able to crush the snake demon into nothingness by raising a finger seriously. But he didn't use any spirit energy or spells. Instead, he used his own physical strength, like the officers in the prison in the mortal world, to extort confessions from prisoners. This was the reason why Lu Laodao was stunned. If anyone else did this, Lu Laodao wouldn't be surprised. But it was Li Yunxin. He knew that Li Yunxin was almost out of control. Although it was still within the limits of self-control, it was still out of control. He lost his previous disguise, patience, and grace. He became a hysterical and terrifying thug, pouring the most primitive force into the body of a demoness. Lu Laodao didn't know how to define Li Yunxin's current state. This was not mentioned in the heart study that Li Yunxian had passed on to him. It started after Red Lady was taken away by Bai Yunxin. Li Yunxin was silent for a while and sighed a few times. Then, he went to the main hall of the palace hall and asked Qi Duanjin a few questions. The snake spirit naturally wouldn't say anything. And so it began. Right now, Li Yunxin was staring straight at the snake spirit, breathing heavily. The violence had been going on for an hour. He should also be tired. Lao Dao took a deep breath and called him in a low voice. Brother Xan, he called out a few times. But Li Yunxin turned a deaf ear to him. Panting like a cow, he stared at the Qi Duanjin on the ground. Lao Dao raised his voice slightly. Brother Xan. Li Yunxin heard it. He turned his head abruptly and stared at him like a beast immersed in killing intent. The old Taoist was a little scared by the scary look in his eyes, but he still gathered his courage and said, Brother Xan, it's time to wake up. But Li Yunxin only looked at him. He stared at him for a while like a snake. Suddenly he said, Do you believe it? Lu Laodao was stunned. Ah. But Li Yunxin didn't seem to expect him to answer. He asked again, Do you want to live? Lao Dao still didn't understand. Li Yunxin said the third sentence. What can I do? At this moment, the only thing the old Taoist could do was blink. He blinked in confusion as he slowly walked to Li Yunxin's side. After a slight hesitation, he carefully raised his hand and put it on Li Yunxin's shoulder. Brother Xan, it's time to rest. His rough palm rested on Li Yunxin's shoulder for a while. Then, Li Yunxin stared at him. He looked at his hand again, and his whole body suddenly became exhausted. It was as if his body was originally full of qi, but now, an eye was pierced somewhere, and the qi was leaking out from the eye. He couldn't stand anymore. He looked at Qi Duanjin on the ground and slowly stepped back. With every step he took, he shrank a little. In the end, he retreated to the wall, stood against it and slowly sat down. He put his arms on his knees and stared blankly at the captive on the ground. After a while, he tilted his head and said to Lu Laodao, You know, I used to look down on people who hit women. Lao Dao didn't know what to say, but he knew what to do. He slowly walked to Li Yunxin's side and sat down. This dragon's son, Dragon King, a demon in the real realm, and a Taoist priest with profound cultivation, had just defeated the enemy's terrible plot and became the winner 2 hours ago. But at this moment, he was like a child again. Li Yunxin was still looking at him. It was already past noon, and the sun was slowly setting in the west. The sunlight at noon was bright white, and the afternoon sunlight had a faint orange color. Thus, the pale yellow sunlight shone through the window of the nave, and shone on Li Yunxin's face, making his hair and pupils light brown. He really looked like a child. He sat against the wall in the sunlight, and looked at Lu Laodao without blinking. She's not a woman. She's a demon. She wants to harm me. You see, she's a female demon now. Who knows if it's a man or a woman hiding in her body? Laodao said. Yes. Who knows? It might not be a woman. Besides, she's a demon, not a human. She's an enemy, not a friend. Yes, it's like what you said. Li Yunxin stared at him. He had a pair of beautiful eyes. At this moment, his eyes were wide open, and there was a sense of innocence and childishness. If one didn't look at his bloody hands. I'm on the edge now. Li Yunxin looked at Lu Laodao. On the edge of the cliff that is about to collapse completely, don't you think? His tone was a little nervous. I want to analyze. Analyze? I look at myself. Look at yourself. Originally, I killed the Freemasons and everything was fine. But suddenly knowing that I might be a fake crown prince. Oh my God, what a terrible blow. As if the whole world is against me. But there are still, great demons in the mysterious realm waiting for me. Maybe they'll kill me. Haha. I heard that Shinryu is also coming. I don't know if he's an enemy or a friend. Damn, I killed his son. Lu Laodao stretched out a hand, put it on Li Yunxin's shoulder again, and patted it. Li Yunxin paused, but still continued. Ha, so many bad things. Every one of them is a matter of life and death. Ha. People who see it don't think it's a big deal. I'm too weak. Damn. Those people in life. Their girlfriends cheated on them. They were fired. They failed their courses. They ran out of money. The rent was due. They lost their mobile phone. And they caught a cold. They feel like the world is ending. And they can't live anymore. Why do I feel like it's the end of the world? When he said the last sentence, he almost roared. Lu Laodao's hand on his shoulder could feel the vibration of his body. The old man didn't know what Li Yunxin's last words meant. But he knew roughly what it meant. He hesitated for a moment, and slowly moved his hand up. He put it on the top of Li Yunxin's head. Then slowly, he stroked his hair. He whispered, "No one will laugh at you. Brother Xian, no one will laugh at you. It's just the two of us. Only the two of us in this house. If you want to say something, just say it. I'm listening." Ah. Li Yunxin stared at him. After staring for a while, he exhaled. His body slowly collapsed, and fell on Lu Laodao's body. Like a grandson who had been wronged, he fell on his grandfather's body. Lu Laodao's body stiffened, but he soon relaxed. He exhaled softly, and slowly patted Li Yunxin's back with his hand. He heard Li Yunxin say, "What can I do? What can I do? Then should I fight with her? Psycho. I might not even be able to beat her. And then I'll be wiped out by the people outside? Psycho." He muttered to himself as if he was sleep-talking. After talking to himself for a while, he said, "I want to too. Psycho. Psycho. Psycho woman." The old Taoist slowly understood. But just as he thought of a few words to say to Li Yunxin, Brother Xian's tone changed again. "I'll go back sooner or later. Bastard. I was going to play with you slowly and eat you. Ha, you're lucky, and your brother is fierce enough to save you, huh? I didn't expect that. I'm doing well here, huh? I'll go back sooner or later." Li Yunxin's tone became violent. Like an evil beast hiding in the darkness, he stared at the enemy with his blood-red eyes, and cursed in a low voice. He poured out the most vicious words in Lu Laodao's arms, as if he was narrating a revenge story. But he used a lot of words that Lu Laodao had never heard before. He really couldn't understand. But he knew it was not a bad thing. Suddenly Li Yunxin, who was on the verge of collapse, entered the last stage, doubt, denial, and self-comfort. And now, he was trying to use the terrible memories to rebuild his strong psychological defense mechanism. It was those terrible memories that became the fuse for everything today. He saw Li Yunxin's loss of self-control earlier, like waking up from a nightmare. Lu Laodao really didn't know what kind of terrible past Brother Xian had gone through. But he waited at ease, like a grandfather holding a grandson. After a quarter of an hour, Li Yunxin didn't speak anymore. He became silent in Lu Laodao's arms. Lu Laodao felt Brother Xian's body slowly became stiff like a stone. He thought for a moment, then slowly stood up and walked out the door without looking at Li Yunxin. The afternoon sun was still shining gently. The middle hall of Ziwei Palace in Mount June was peaceful at the moment. The cicadas in the forest were chirping. Although they didn't have long to live, they were still chirping hoarsely. The breeze blew through the forest leaves, and the moisture soaked Mount June. The sun shone on the ground. Some stone bricks on the ground were missing a corner, and ants were crawling along the cracks. Lao Dao's Taoist robe was soon warmed by the sun. He rubbed his hands gently. He basked in the sun for a while. Then he heard steady footsteps coming from the door. Li Yunxin walked behind him. Sorry. His voice was low, like a child who had done something wrong. Lu Laodao didn't turn around, just smiled. Hi. After a while. This is the first time. And the last time. Li Yunxin's voice became steady again. Chapter 280. Lao Dao turned around and looked at Li Yunxin. His hair was slightly messy because of what happened just now. A few strands of hair hung down to his forehead, but this made him look more aloof and unruly, because the expression on his face was no longer one of panic and helplessness, but had become calm, just like how he had always been before. Lao Dao smiled, walked a few steps forward, and sat down on the steps in front of the door. He thought for a moment and said, Brother Xian, do you remember what happened on Nanshan Hill? I thought that Brother Xian was no longer around. But one night, you came to the mountain god temple on Nanshan Hill. Only then did I know you were still alive. Then you asked me, what was Hong Nyangzi's plan? Li Yunxin stood behind him for a while, and slowly walked to Lu Laodao's side and sat down. They sat side by side on the steps of the nave. After Lu Laodao said these two sentences, he was silent. Li Yunxin also didn't speak. They looked at the lake and the mountains in the distance. It was hard to imagine that such a beautiful scene had a terrible killing intent. And now they were enjoying a moment of peace before the storm. After sitting like this for a while, Lu Laodao turned his face and looked at Li Yunxin seriously. Brother Xian, where are you from? Li Yunxin narrowed his eyes and looked into the distance. He sighed softly. I'm not from here. I'm from another world. Lao Dao wasn't surprised. He nodded slightly. Then how did you come to this world? Li Yunxin lowered his head and smiled. Some people over there offended me. It took me 10 years to catch one of the most hateful of them all. I tied him up in a room. I hated him for so long, I couldn't let him off easy. So I cut a piece of meat from his leg every day and ate it. I ate like this for a month and just finished one leg. It was saved by his underlings. Then they caught me. I was killed by them. Then for some reason I came to this world. Lu Laodao thought for a moment. It looks like a terrible hatred. Yeah. Li Yunxin smiled. The kind that is absolutely irreconcilable. Lao Dao paused for a moment. Suddenly he changed the topic. Brother Xian's world. Does it also have love between men and women? Probably. It's different from here? Li Yunxin was stunned and kept silent for a while. Then he looked into the distance and narrowed his eyes. It's the same. It's also different. In my old world I loved as fast as I hated. Sincerity was easy to see and easy to hide. Everyone said that they would only love one person in their life. But in fact, everyone would love many people. They might not be together because they liked each other, but they might not be separated because they hated each other. Does it sound very messy and scary? Lu Laodao nodded. It sounds like a group of demons dancing. So Brother Xian is afraid because of what he experienced in that world. Li Yunxin was silent for a while and said, I didn't experience it in that world either. Lao Dao was surprised. Brother Xian's world, is it human? Li Yunxin smiled. There are only humans in our world. There are no demons, maybe there are, but I have never seen them. Do you want to ask me why I haven't started a family and experienced anything? Yes. My world is different from this world. Li Yunxin smiled. There are a lot of things like that. Not everyone wants to start a family. I have experienced the matters between men and women, but it doesn't mean there is love between men and women. So, Lu Laodao nodded thoughtfully. This is the second time, Brother Xian. Last time you were like this. It was also because of Red Lady. Now the second time is because of her. Lao Dao turned to look at Li Yunxin. Brother Xian, have you ever thought that maybe you are in trouble? For example, when we just entered Dongting, you killed Red Lady. The inhibition would be unlocked after a few days. We don't have to be involved in this mess. But since you have shown mercy, you also know this. It means that you and Red Madam have a predestined relationship. Li Yunxin thought for a while. I don't love her. Lao Dao smiled slightly. It is hard to explain the love between men and women. I told you about my past. My real name is Lu Gongzan. At that time, I wanted to wash my hands of being a bandit and had a girlfriend. What kind of girl was she? She was not ugly, nor was her character. If he had to say that he liked her, it was just that he liked her. He wouldn't feel regretful if he left her somewhere else. But at that time, I just wanted to settle down. It was rare to have a girl that I didn't get tired of. Years passed like this. At that time, people asked me what kind of love I had with her. I didn't know if there was. I worked at sunrise and rested at sunset. In winter, I warmed myself in a quilt. In summer, I drove away mosquitoes with a cattail leaf fan. I got money and gave it to her. She served me 2 meals a day. It was called living together. At that time, I thought, what is love between men and women? It should be like the chivalrous men and women in legends, bloody, vigorous joys and sorrows. Then the scholar and the beauty finally got together. That is love between men and women. I thought, forget it. How can this kind of thing be enjoyed by everyone? I am certainly not. Lu Laodao paused and sighed. Later, they were all killed by Meng Ao by mistake. Note, Lu Laodao's past, see Volume 1, Chapter 107. When I saw that they were gone, I realized, that kind of feeling that I had never experienced before. Losing my sword and saber is a kind of feeling. Losing my parents is also a kind of feeling. But at that time, they were gone. But it was not the same thing as losing a treasure or losing my parents. At that time, I realized, that is probably love between men and women. I thought I had never experienced it before. But I have always been experiencing it. So, although Brother Xian is extremely smart and knows how to read people's minds, but since you have never experienced it before, how do you know if you are experiencing it now? Li Yunxin listened to Lu Laodao's words and was silent for a while. Then he raised his head. What you said makes sense. But I still feel that it is not. I have forgotten a lot of things in the past. I didn't think about it for more than 10 years. But when I suddenly experienced it again, it was like a floodgate was opened. Most of my pressure recently is related to life and death. All these factors are gathered together, so I almost collapsed. I know all these things, and I also have a way to adjust my mentality. He thought for a while and slowly stood up. But about Red Lady, maybe you are right. It is not that I am right about the love between men and women, but that she may become a disaster for me. When I was in the city of Wei, Yunzi said that even if I am a demon, I still need to find the Taoist heart. After that, Kuan Wuzi also said the same thing. Li Yunxin smiled. In fact, I have that thing for a long time. Self-hypnosis, psychological suggestion, consciousness strengthening. Call it what you will. Use these things to create something like an obsession. Taoist priests and swordsmen abandon their feelings and desires. They practice until they have no feelings and almost don't care about anything. They don't care about anything. So they need something called the Taoist heart to support themselves. What's the difference between it and the obsession of ghost cultivators? I have the Taoist heart. I have to walk on the path of cultivation of Taoist priests and swordsmen. Li Yunxin frowned. After thinking for a long time, he finally said, Then I will go through this tribulation, if it is really a tribulation. Lu Laodao gently exhaled. How will Brother Xian go through this tribulation? I will go through it in the way that Daotong and Kinzo people go through it. Li Yunxin looked at Lu Laodao. My father Li Chunfeng once told me that it is the most convenient to go through the love tribulation in the real state and the mysterious state, to separate a real body and fall into the mortal world with others. If I succeed in the tribulation, I will cut off that clone, which can be regarded as cutting off a relationship. this tribulation will be considered over. I don't know what the principle is, but since Taoist priests and swordsmen have been doing this for thousands of years, it should be effective. So, when I get through those things outside, I will go to find Red Lady. If she is not dead, I will give her the fruit of love. Lu Laodao listened to his words carefully, and then thought about it seriously. Finally he nodded. If it works, it is also your style of doing things, Brother Xian. I thought you would be secretive about this kind of thing, but now that you have really decided to do it, you are not shy. Alas, no wonder you can make rapid progress in cultivation. After all, you have a clever heart. Li Yunxin's face was as calm as usual. It is just something that has to be done. At this time, the dim yellow color in the sunlight became more and more intense. Looking to the west, the sun was hanging alone at the intersection of the water and the sky. There were no clouds around the sunset, and it looked like a red marble. After all, it was the end of summer. The sky gradually became a little cold in the evening. If he squinted his eyes and looked carefully, he could see a faint crescent moon in the dark blue sky. Li Yunxin and Lu Laodao looked at the scenery in the distance for a while, and slowly frowned. Because the sky seemed to be flickering slightly. It was like this Dongting was originally covered by a huge glass cover. Now the cover was about to melt, so the scenery on the top of the sky was slowly distorted. The flickering became faster and faster, and finally connected into one, as if the fiery sun was trembling by itself. But finally, after a quarter of an hour, the flickering stopped. Li Yunxin seemed to hear a pop sound in his ear, as if a big soap bubble burst. Therefore, he and Lu Laodao both knew that the enchantment of Dongting disappeared. Faster than Bai Yunxin predicted, Li Yunxin took a few steps forward and turned to Lu Laodao. The snake monster said before. Hatred and Evil King were both injured. Evil King is still in the Pitfall Mountain, but hatred came to me. But now hatred is still hatred, and he will become another person when it gets dark. Li Yunxin said while looking up at the sunset. According to the past situation, there were still 2 hours before it was completely dark. He turned his head again. I am going to talk to him now, and then we will follow the plan. Lu Laodao nodded. Okay. You have to be careful. Li Yunxin smiled and turned to the lake. I won't die. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.